Awesome. Yes, that is so cool. Absolutely, yeah. I wish I could more like it. I'm not the person. I'm not the person so I don't have a better perspective.
Yeah, let's just,
I'll ask.
essentially got
That's the good stuff. So I say right now.
You have a timer?
Great idea. That's clear.
It's kind of sort of like,
Exactly. And that's what I'm talking about. They actually have, because they actually have some. Through their legislation, they have certain legislative. Like that organization is really so they're not like they have an outside use the design review committee has legislatively has the right to any law that is being by legislation you have to state.
All right, good morning, everyone. Let's get started, please. Thank you.
They have some things like that.
You gotta go on the other side.
Oh, you did. So wherever you are. Experimenting with this. And I hope that means that you all still take the opportunity to sit near people you don't necessarily know as well.
So only next to people I love.
All right, greetings everyone. Today is Saturday, the 15th. Our APAB meeting is now officially called to order at 10:09 a.m. Before we do the adoption of the agenda, I would like to make a change. We initially did not have any board appointee reports because we had 3 presentations and we felt that was a little bit of a heavy agenda. But because we have had some cancellations, I would like to add a report from from LRB, from Terry Ross, and I asked that comes right after public comment, since Mr. Ross has other engagements this morning. And that is the only change to the agenda.
Madam Chair,
Sir,
I make a motion to approve the agenda with the addition to LRB report after public comment.
second. Thank you, Ms. Any discussion? Any objections? The agenda has been adopted, unanimous consent. All right, do we have public comment today?
Madam Chair, do we have the voting report?
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. Sorry about that, Mr. Ross. All right, so you have in your materials the meeting report from March. Since we did not meet in April, because some of us did attend the mayor's summit of neighborhoods, and then that was in April, and then in May we had our strategic planning session with Sizemore. So if you need to take a couple of minutes just to review the information.
Madam Chair, I make a motion that we approve the meeting report.
Second.
It has been properly motioned by Ms. Flowers, seconded by Mr. Hunter. Any discussion? Are there any objections? The March 16th voting report is approved by unanimous consent. And to for the record, there are 18 attendees at today's meeting. So now we can go with the public comment.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Jerry Ross, former APAB member, current LRB board member, but I'm coming to you today as a resident of the city of Atlanta, and that alone, I want to make that clear. Okay, it's good to see you all, and I want to thank each and every one of you for your service. I know how it is to get up on a Saturday morning, come down here and advocate on behalf of the residents within the city of Atlanta. That's the work you do is important, and I thank you all for it. Okay? I'm here today regarding public comment, regarding the investigation into the HR director, Ms. Talisha Williams, who was placed on administrative leave last month for the city of Atlanta. And there were some allegations about her hiring her daughter, giving her a job, usurping the hiring process and expediting the onboarding process. And there was an and this was actually in 2022. I want you guys to follow the timelines. December of 2022. In April of 2023, there was an investigation that that came out of the Inspector General's office. And that was in April of 2023. In May of this year, last month, she was placed on administrative leave. Now, here's some extraordinary circumstances. In May, late May, I think it was the 20th of May, Inspector General Manigault actually went before City Council. And I did not see her speech or how she addressed it. I read it in an article in the AJC by the journalist Riley, that she was facing pushback on the investigation itself, right? Ugly, you guys. There's no place for nepotism in city government. These are our tax dollars, and the only ones who suffer from that is us residents, okay? And the only promise we have is our property taxes will be increasing, right? And that's not just because of this, but because of several things. So I'm asking APAB to support Inspector General Manigault in her investigation into this, and press City Council and the Mayor's office to not impede her investigation, but to assist in the investigation, right? Is that my turn? You guys didn't tell me how much time I have. You know I'm long-winded. So anyway, I'm asking one of the committees here at APAB to take up this flagpole and support Inspector General Manigault, right? My timing is on point because she's actually here to speak with you guys today. I just want to express the need to support her to keep Atlanta straight and make a new definition for the Atlanta way, which does not include nepotism or retaliation. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there any other public comments? Any other public comment? All right, so Mr. Ross, if you can come up and provide your report for
Different hat.
license review board.
Okay, different hat. Yeah, you guys, I still sit on the license review board as an appointee by the APAB here. And just last week, we had an application come from one of the MPUs, in which I insisted to the applicant, as well as the other board members, that I am unapologetically community. And the reason I take that position is because you guys appointed me and I came here as a representative of the BUT, T as in terrific. And so I just want to let you all know that when you come before the license review board, number one, if you denied an application, you need representation from the NPU. We don't need a large crowd because there's only going to be one person that will be able to speak on behalf of the NPU's position. But we do need someone there. Many times we get denials. There's no one there from the NPU to give us their position, and there's nothing entered in the NPU report itself other than denied. And so it's difficult for us to work with them. That's pretty much it. Are there any questions? Yes.
I want to make sure how you receive comments. We do try to follow up with an email and have a person there. We have had several denials or I would think in the last few months that have been long-winded cases. And we put them on the planner's report, but then we also follow up with an email. So are you receiving it that way, or how do you get your information?
No, we are not receiving the emails. What we receive is the NPU report.
Okay.
So whatever is in that report is the only information that we have from the NPU, which is why we asked the representative to be there to relay that information to us.
Okay, I'll go back, I guess, with the planning department and see how we need to make sure that you receive that information ahead of time too, so you have a clear understanding. We have a woman that writes, I think, a very good report, so we want to make sure that you get that because she also puts a lot of time and energy into it.
Yeah, and I just want to share with you guys, because I get calls, right? Folks want to call me and discuss matters with me, which I avoid because it's a conflict of interest. And, you know, I signed the same form that you guys signed to avoid even the appearance of inappropriateness, right? And so if I discuss it ahead of time, then I recuse myself when it comes before us. So if you want my vote, don't come talk to me about it.
And excuse me, I apologize. It wasn't the license review board, but we did have one earlier on in the year.
Okay.
So we haven't had anybody need to go,
Okay.
but we'll make sure that we do that.
Well, when you
Okay.
make sure you have a representative. If it's not the chair, then you have someone that the chair has appointed to represent it.
Okay, thank you.
Because we will get random residents coming down from the NPUs as well, and they will make their statements during public comment. They're not representing the NPU, but it's hard to discern who is and who isn't. Yes, Amy?
How do we know when they're gonna be on the schedule? Because I can't figure out that the LRB has a second and fourth Thursday schedule, or what date, and what's gonna be on what agenda, unless you proactively go and look for their agendas.
You know what, the meetings are set at the beginning of the year, and I sent that to Segura. Segura, she gave me a side eye, you guys. I didn't send it to you.
No, I'm not saying,
But
I didn't say you did, but I was having issues at the beginning of the year with the email account. So
Okay.
maybe.
Okay, well, I can resend it. The meeting's on Tuesday, every other Tuesday is how it works. But there are some days off, and so, and then the best way to find out if an applicant is on the agenda is to reach out to Zone 1, Sergeant Thompson. He actually sets the agenda for the LRB. Yes, Michelle.
Going back to your previous statement where you talked about representing the NPU, I happen to watch the LRB meetings. I enjoy them for the reason. I have seen, it's very interesting. And I have seen where, especially an applicant, when it's facing the uphill battle, will say when a person is, well, maybe the statement that the person is not there from the NPU or representing NPU, the person might say they are,
Yes,
which puts the board in a very tight spot.
it does.
So how do, let's say, you know, like I'm not a chair, but let's say my chair wants me to show represent, how do you communicate in advance to say, okay, Reginald Russell is not coming, but I'm sending Rashid in advance to the board so they know that this is the official representative of the NPU?
Well, we work off an honor system. If you say that you are, then we take you for your word. It's generally how it works. But if you want to document it formally, reach out to Sergeant Thompson.
Okay.
And let him know that this individual will be representing the NPU's position on the application.
Thank you.
Two or three sentences, what are 2 or 3 of the most compelling reasons that the board finds to pause in terms of
In terms of the denial, it can be a wide sentence. An applicant has a criminal record, which, because we're bound by the ordinance, the liquor ordinance. And so in order to disqualify a person, they have to be a criminal, or they have to support criminal behavior at that location. Or the other things that come to mind are not enough parking, zoning, zoning correctly, that kind of thing. So, but the liquor laws are weak, you guys, and they don't give us a lot of juice to deny applications. And that makes it difficult for us because if we deny an application just because we know that applicant has no business with liquor license, they'll turn around and sue the city, lose the case, and then taxpayer dollars go to that applicant to reimburse them for the decision that we made. Yes, Lisa.
I think Stephanie.
Oh, Stephanie.
So so my question is around the application. You may not be able to do this, but on that, sometimes you have a email address on that so you reach out to the applicant about our meeting process.
Yeah.
And then sometimes it's not. So if that can be some kind of consistency with both the email address and the telephone number, because it will be, you have either one, it's not, you have to go dig and call Officer Thomas, and then when he gets back to you.
Well, and believe it or not, Stephanie, there are applicants that actually don't communicate via email.
That's true.
But that's exactly what I'm saying. If they don't put their, it's either the cell phone, the telephone number or the email. It's one of them is gonna be missing. So if I don't have but a email address, that's the only thing I can use.
Right.
If I don't have a telephone number, I can,
Exactly.
so if they on the prefer, maybe in check what their preferred method is of communication, but we need both of those. That's what we need.
And I couldn't agree more. The only thing that you have on your side is the fact that they are required to appear before the MPU. And so when they get there, if you haven't been able to communicate with them, when you get there, you can figure out with them what's their preferred method of communication. You know, and I know you would like to communicate with them before they come before the MPU. That doesn't happen, then you can actually.
Well, that's what I do now, but I'm just thinking about.
Yeah,
If
you
you're
can
gonna make the system and
ask,
process better, that could be a suggestion.
yeah, you can ask them to defer, you know, so, but it's Zone 1, Sergeant Thompson, and Lieutenant Connor, they handle all the applications and everything, so,
Mr. Ross,
yes.
would you mind reiterating, and I know I ask you this every time you come, but it's that important and we face it pretty much daily. Would you mind reiterating to the board, and I would ask those that are not chairs to ensure that your chair gets this information in particular, that the code only requires an applicant to attend an MPU meeting.
That is correct. The applicant is only required to attend an MPU meeting. Any MPU that insists that the applicant go before the impacted community is actually going against the city ordinance. And you can't do that as an MPU in good standing. Now, like MPUT, we strongly suggest that they go before the impacted community. Right, we tell them it just makes sense, good business sense, but they are not required and they don't have to go. The only place they have to go is before the MPU. But,
It's a zone too, right?
No, that's alcohol and events.
yeah,
Special events.
Only alcohol and events.
right. Mayor's office, especially events, yeah.
Hold on, Lisa had a question.
Yes, please.
Yes,
Oh,
Jerry.
sorry.
No, you're fine. So the ordinance, is there any way we can add to it or adjust it? Because I just got a couple of questions because, first of all, these impacted communities, they change address all the time, like you're familiar with. I mean, change ownership.
Right.
They have lots of issues on that property and nothing gets resolved. They're still in business. And third, there's no follow-up. If you get a license, just like you have a driver's license, there's certain rules and regulations. Is there any way as this board can do something for these problem areas in our communities that just keep operating no matter what happens based on this ordinance?
To strengthen the alcohol ordinance, there is actually a task force, ATAG 3, is it?
Yes.
Yeah, ATAG 3, and that's what they're reviewing right now. And this board has representation
Yes.
on that task force.
Yes.
Okay, and that's what they're reviewing right now. But of course, the city government, it takes time. for those of you that didn't know, we actually at one point got reimbursed for parking here at APAB. But it took us 2 years to get that. I mean, literally 24 months.
So you're saying changing the ordinance,
Pandemic kicked in, yeah.
so you're saying changing and strengthening the requirements for the ordinance.
Absolutely. Especially.
Is this task force, is that what they're working on now?
Yes, that's what
Okay.
they're working on right now. And that's
Okay.
one of the recommendations that we hope to
Okay.
come down.
Okay, thank you.
Lisa, if you've got some suggestions, you can send an email to the NPUE chair.
Okay,
Courtney Smith.
Courtney Smith.
She's the one that's been kind of spearheading it citywide.
Yeah.
And the APAB representative is Kay Stevenson at NPUF.
And I can tell you, Courtney is doing her due diligence. She was at the last LRB hearing this past week. Yes, this past Tuesday, she was there with camera recording it. So she is using due diligence for that task.
So I just wanted to make a comment that Lakewood Heights is 1,200 residents, and 5 licensed cities. What we have found that is most effective is, first of all, getting with the zone command and getting a report, what they call for services at that location. And they will usually give you a 12-month call. And then in addition to that, you also want to go by and take shots. Most often, our issues are inability to maintain control of the premises, which is reflected both in the police reports, the zone reports, but it's also reflected in photography, photos, going by at times where there seems to be loitering. And if the loitering reflects the history of fights, shots fired, vandalism, et cetera, we have been successful because there's been a clear, what is this in?
Yeah, clear and convincing, because the applicant is responsible for what goes on inside the property and around their property.
The most compelling is those reports, the call for services.
Yeah.
Call
Yeah.
for services.
And APD has a wonderful database which they can track how many calls to that address in the last year, 2 years, 5 years, or 10 years. And so when you submit that report, that's very helpful.
Absolutely.
You know, and of course, the applicant's strategy is to change it or change ownership. But during the course of investigating and cross-examining the applicant, you can ask this applicant, well, were you involved with the previous enterprise? Right? And so there's your key right there.
Thank you, Mr. Ross.
I have a question, David.
To Debbie.
Is it, you said E and K was the representative?
E and Kay Stevenson at F.
Yeah, Casey.
Yeah.
Kay's on the task force.
Yeah.
She's on
She's the APAB representative.
And if you don't have an email for Kay, you can send it to me and I'll send it to Kay. She's in my NP.
So for Mr. Ross, I'd say if you can take back to LRB. For some reason, I did not know that you all did not require official notification from the NPUs of who would be speaking at the meetings. I would strongly suggest that that is the case, that you all have a system in place where if it is not the chair or an established committee member or land use chair, that you receive a verified email or an email from the MPU saying, this is the person we're going to represent, because what happens is anybody can go and speak, which is their right to do.
Right.
But they may be speaking against what a gathered group of people have come.
Just this week, we had an applicant come before us, the MPU had approved it, right? An individual came down there, Rashid, if you were watching, and a former elected official came down there and spoke against this applicant, right? But what we're looking at is the MPU report, which 58 people voted in favor of. And this one individual said, no way, no how should this applicant receive a license, right? And I think we sent it back to the MPU to get it worked out, but in the meantime, because of being a former elected official, he got a little cloudy and he got some airtime with the LRB. So
One last one real quick is the final arbiter is the mayor. And we have had disapprovals with the mayor nonetheless rejecting the findings of the LRB and approval.
Absolutely.
So immediately you should start a letter campaign to the mayor with outlining your opposition to this project, notwithstanding the fact now that the LRB has found in favor of the community.
And not just a letter writing, but a phone call campaign as well, because the mayor does make the final decision.
Yes.
Yeah, it's, the city's gonna get sued, let the mayor sign.
But let the mayor come live here.
Pass the buck, yeah, right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ross.
All right, thank you guys. Good to see everyone, friends, colleagues, frenemies. What's up, Kyle Kessler? Help me. Good to see everyone. And again, thank you guys for your service.
Thank you.
For the lexicon printing.
All right, we'll move on to the next order of business. We now have,
Oh,
from the Office of the Inspector General, Shannon Manigault, and Ms. Manigault have 15 minutes for your presentation. Then we'll take some Q&A.
Morning. Right.
Okay.
Good morning. I'm Shannon Manigault. I'm the Inspector General for the City of Atlanta. Thank you so much for having me this morning. It's critically important that I interact with this group, and it's not for the first time. Some of you remember I presented to APAB in October of 2021, and then again in January of 2022 for NPU Chair's orientation. So some of you might have already had some interaction with me, but it's really important that Office of Inspector General have an audience with this group because we are the people's watchdog, and you all are, without question, the closest to the people in terms of reaching the people of the city of Atlanta, and in particular those who are civically engaged. The other main reason is that you all have representation on our board. Mr. Taylor is the current board member representing APAB on the governing board of the Office of the Inspector General. So with that representation, I think this group has a particular stake in the work of the office and some of the things that have been happening. So my limited time, I want to just give a brief overview of how we came to be, because I think it helps inform some of the important issues that we're facing. Give you a little bit about what's been happening in the last several months in terms of issues facing the Office of the Inspector General, and then absolutely engage with questions that you might have. The materials that we provided are really kind of baseline information, but I've got a treasure trove of other information in the back for those people who are interested in learning more. Let me introduce two members of our leadership team from the office. We have Rosalind Anderson, who is our business manager, and we have Brad Garvey, who's the Deputy Inspector General for our independent procurement review. So, brief background is that for those of you who were in the city in 2017, you might remember when the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Northern District of Georgia surfaced on a years-long investigation into corruption in City Hall. So a raft of indictments came through, including indictments that all ultimately resulted in guilty pleas and guilty verdicts of people including some city contractors, a deputy chief of staff, the chief financial officer for the city, the chief procurement officer for the city, commissioner of watershed management. So really talking about some issues at the highest level of city hall government. Mostly he's dealt with bribes, kind of traditional government corruption, people taking money in order to exchange for favors, representing their own personal interests as opposed to the public interest. But there are other issues as well. In the aftermath of that, the city took a number of kind of stopgap measures to address some of the issues that were revealed in the course of the indictments. So when the chief procurement officer was indicted, the thought was, well, maybe there needs to be a second eye on procurement. And so the independent procurement review team was informed of the city auditor's office. There were issues about disclosure of some of the underlying issues surrounding the investigation, so a chief transparency officer was put in place. They put together an independent compliance officer that was established and then funded but never filled because the thought was that there needed to be something for compliance. But ultimately, there was a stop and taking a step back to think about a more holistic approach to addressing the issues that were revealed in the indictments. And so the council and the mayor formed a task force for the promotion of public trust. So a blue ribbon panel, esteemed kind of Atlanta stakeholders, taking a look at the city's existing oversight landscape and where there might be gaps or possible improvements. And they held 5 public hearings, heard from the existing leaders of the oversight entities, heard from a municipal integrity expert. They heard from the Inspector General for the City of Baltimore and the Inspector General for the City of Philadelphia. And ultimately, after all of its work and research, they came out with a report in October 2019 that had one primary recommendation, and it was that the City of Atlanta needed an Office of Inspector General, needed an independent body to review fraud, waste, abuse, and corruption. That this would be in addition to the existing landscape that already was there for the ethics office and the city auditor's office, but that this was a particular need and that there were trappings of an Office of Inspector General that the City of Atlanta could benefit. So that is kind of the backdrop. What ended up being created, because the city very quickly accepted that recommendation and moved to effectuate it. So within 4 months, built into the city charter was the new Office of the Inspector General. It has 2 divisions now, the Compliance Division, which is principally responsible for the investigations of complaints and proactive reviews for fraud, waste, abuse, corruption. They also are responsible for doing prevention efforts. So we do anti-corruption lectures across the city. Because certainly the best case scenario is to prevent something from happening and make sure that all city employees are on the same page about what should be happening and what shouldn't be. And they're also then responsible for the enforcement angle, so that if we conduct investigations and find there's wrongdoing, they're responsible for then making the referral letters to department heads. So department heads can then take disciplinary action. If there's criminal misconduct that we find, we then work with prosecutors to see that appropriate charges are then brought against the individuals, whether it's utilities or vendors. The Independent Procurement Review Division is responsible for reviewing all the city solicitations that come before council worth $1 million or more. So really kind of any project of any significance, as long as the solicitation is going through council review, the IPRO team reviews that. The IPRO team is really focused on making sure that there's a level playing field, that there's no kind of favoritism in the procurement process. Indeed, of that raft of indictments and guilty pleas and verdicts that I described, most of them had to do with violations and abuses of the procurement system. So the IPRO team does a kind of proactive review that's concurrent with the procurement to identify where there might be problems so that then they can be addressed before they're presented to council. And then the reports then help inform city council as to its decisions about city solicitations. All right. The board, right? You have an entity like an Office of Inspector General whose responsibility and jurisdiction includes city employees, departments, board members, and vendors, and elected officials are part of the purview. And so in creating the office, they wanted to make sure that the Office of the Inspector General would report to the very people who would be looking to investigate, because very clearly that would usher in possible political influence and interference. And so we report to a governing board as really an insurance policy on the independence of the office. So none of the individuals who are on the governing board are appointed by the mayor or by any elected officials. They're appointed by entities like this. So we have APAB, we have professional and civic organizations, 7 major universities. All of these entities then make the nomination for our 9-member board. And the whole intention is to make sure that the work that we do then is insulated from political interference. So with all of that backdrop, wanted to highlight some of the issues that we've been encountering. We're only 3+ years old. So really we're just getting going in terms of the work that we've been producing for the office. But as we've been producing that work, we've been getting more and more pushback and more hurdles and obstacles in our way as we're trying to just do our charter mandate, to do our jobs and fulfill our responsibilities. Part of this is structural. So the way that we have to get access to most materials is by going through various individuals in departments, which poses a problem. I tried to change our legislation so that we could have direct access, because that for sure is the gold standard and that preserves the gold standard. By having direct access to information, it means that the confidentiality and integrity of investigation is preserved. Because the more people who know about an investigation, the more likelihood that there are compromises, right? That word gets around, including to some of the individuals and the subjects of investigation. And you don't want that to happen because it kind of taints the outcome. But you also don't want it to happen because when we embark in an investigation, it is 100% innocent until proven guilty, right? That allegations, either allegations, are not substantiated in the first instance, right? We're fact finders. We have an allegation that there's something that is problematic, and we then conduct our investigation to gather facts to see whether there's any there. And if there is, then we'll take appropriate steps. But if there's not, then we try to keep that as contained as possible, because you don't ever want to have the taint of an allegation against an employee or a vendor who's done nothing wrong. So in addition to the operational clear benefits of having direct access, it really is about kind of preserving the investigation and safeguarding the individuals who are being investigated. But the way that the city set up access, we have to go through these channels where custodians of record then are in a position to, unfortunately, spread information about our investigations. And recently, that's always a possibility when you don't have direct access. But in the last few months, we've seen evidence that this has happened, which is terrible, right? Another issue that comes from not having the direct access means that then there is full amount of control over what we get and when we get it. So we've also encountered a number of significant delays in us receiving information pursuant to requests that we have, kind of routine requests, where then we are not given the information that we are seeking. Sometimes not at all. And as it stands in the charter, we're supposed to have immediate access to city records. And the only qualification to that is where things might be confidential or privileged. We have a situation where we'd asked in the course of an investigation for a set of internal policies. So the individual who was being interviewed said, oh yeah, no, we've got an SLA for that. So the service level agreement, like basically here are the metrics that we use to try to make sure that we are delivering whatever it is to the public. These are things that are talked about publicly all the time at city council meetings, in quarterly updates, because it's a performance standard. Clearly not confidential, clearly not privileged. And so under the charter, we should have immediate access to that. We have one matter where we asked for that set of documentation a few months ago, and we're still waiting. We've seen emails where it's clear that there is gatekeeping and safeguarding and decision-making as to what we should and shouldn't have. Now, as an independent agency, this is clearly a problem. It can't be that those who are on the receiving end of some oversight or investigation are getting to decide what city records, what city property, what city personnel we have access to. And all of those things are outlined in the charter. There have been a number of improvements that we sought in the charter that were denied last year that we're now seeking again. Because at the time that we tried to have these improvements last year, the thought was, well, some of these issues that you're highlighting, speculative, you haven't encountered them yet, even though we had had some kernels of them, but come back to us when there's a real problem. So now it's demonstrated that we have a problem. And so we are hoping to have improvements to our legislation. Unfortunately, in the face of us seeking these improvements so that we could better do our job for the benefit of Atlanta, we have some countermeasures that are being taken, or at least signaled that they're being prepared, that will make it harder for us to do our jobs. And so the purpose of being here is to, one, again, make sure that there's awareness about the existence of the office, because we're always trying to make sure that you all know, so you can bring back to your respective NPUs and share with your communities who we are, what we are, and as potential witnesses and to misconduct, then you can respond. But also to make sure that you know some of the issues that we're facing, so that if you want more information, like I said, we're all three of us are here so that we can better answer questions at the conclusion of the meeting and provide additional resources, so that you can be as informed as possible about the potential threat to the Office of the Inspector General and the function that we serve the city. So I hear that was time. I'm very happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Mr. Schluckner, Stowe. Well, how about this? We'll start and go this way. Ms. Lover, do you have a question? No. Mr. Schluckner?
Yeah, thank you for being here, Joe Silver, MPUO. I was perusing through some of these closed case details. I noticed that a lot of them are pending acceptance. So does this go back to the theme that you were mentioning, is that, we're having trouble, with folks kind of taking our advice and our recommendations? So have you been given any teeth to kind of say, hey, if you don't show good faith in these recommendations or something, we're going to, I don't know, fine you or bring you up for additional audit review, those types of things?
So thank you for the question and for highlighting a feature, because I think this.
Could you explain this question?
Yes, absolutely. So the question surrounded our policy and procedure recommendations. So included in each of your folders are our annual report. So it's a copy of our most recent annual report, where we include the policy and procedure recommendations that we issued in connection with our matters. So let's say we receive an allegation about individual misconduct. Let's say, that you're accused of stealing from a storeroom, supply room. We'll conduct an investigation, and perhaps we find that no, you've actually not stolen anything. But in the course of the investigation, we found that the supply room has no locks, and that there's expensive equipment that's kept in the room. We might then issue a policy and procedure recommendation to close that vulnerability, right? So we make the recommendation to a department to say, hey, we received an allegation. While there was no individual misconduct here, we identified this problem. We have the recommendation that you buy locks for your supplier, right? The goal here, again, this is part of what we see as the prevention effort. So not just our anti-corruption lectures, but here, sometimes it's where we found that there already was a problem, so this is to prevent future problems. But other times, like the example that I just gave, it's to make sure that a potential vulnerability isn't exploited. So we issue these recommendations. One of the issues that we've been having, I think, is a broader lack of engagement with the office. And I think that non-responsiveness to the policy and procedure recommendations is a really glowing example. These are all recommendations that are supposed to help the function and operation of the city. In a world where we're all on the same page, you know, the Office of the Inspector General, the council, the mayor's office, APAB, that we all want city operations to be conducted with integrity, then it can beg the question of why there wouldn't even be a response to a number of recommendations that result from our investigations. To the question of teeth, the charter gives the Office of the Inspector General some latitude to issue sanctions, but generally we don't do that. And the idea is largely that we see ourselves as fact finders, right? And that we are then making referrals to various entities to then pursue disciplinary action if it comes to employee misconduct, potential suspension and debarment when it comes to vendor misconduct. You know, it's part of the reason why we issue some of our public reports for those individuals who aren't subject to the same kind of scrutiny from department heads, to make sure that the public knows what's going on, so that then there could be public response and having to engage with members of the public about some of these findings. But it's closer to the nature of our work to highlight these as issues and then hope that everyone then responds appropriately. Sometimes that doesn't happen. In the case of our policy and procedure recommendations, I think we've recently received some more responses, but there was a point in mid-May of this year where of the 55 recommendations that we'd issued, we'd only received responses to 11. So not the yes, we accept this and we're going to implement it, but of mere responses to yes or no, or you know, that we've only gotten that to 20% of the recommendations that we've issued since the office has been in existence.
Ms. Manigault, thank you for calling. Thank you for being here today. Barbara from NPUG. My question is, what is the scope of the finance for the infractions committed? Is it in a few hundred thousand, several millions? And for the infractions, has there been any punishment for the individuals? And who is at the top level hierarchy in terms of that's not allowing you to get the information that you need?
Sure. So, gosh, putting a value on the infractions, that's difficult. I'm going to punt on that because there are sometimes questions about the exact dollar value for things that we identified. Then there's the open question of, well, how do you identify dollar value and what could be prevented, right? But I'll give us a good example, a report that we issued last summer, where it had to do with an employee who had gotten into an accident, was on the cell phone while driving, just clear infraction, had a collision, caused damage, said it wasn't his fault, cell phone, clear video showing all of that. But it prompted us to do a broader review of preventable accidents and the extent to which the city is recouping money for this. Because in our minds, and under the law, that these are the damages that came from this preventable accident shouldn't be borne by members of the public. This is the responsibility of the employee. We took a look and had just a handful of the departments that we reviewed and found that the information was incomplete, but for just 1 year with incomplete data with only a handful of agencies, we found that there was in the neighborhood of $325,000 that was borne by the public that should have been by individual employees. So there's significant money potentially in a number of these matters. And there we made a host of recommendations surrounding the tightening of the laws and regulations and enforcement of these policies, both because it's clearly anticipated in the law that the public not bear these costs, and also because there's an obvious deterrent effect in terms of people's conduct if they know they're going to have to pay for the accident costs when they get into them, and then just none of that was being realized, not the savings, not the deterrent, nothing. And we're still awaiting responses to those recommendations, which were issued 10 months ago.
Mr. Chairman, you have a question?
Yes, it's kind of in two parts. First part would be, when any of your investigations cause a bid or contract or procurement process to go south or be delayed by the nature that it's investigation? And then the second part is, by nature, is your office seen by the government entity as an adversarial relationship? Because that's what I'm getting from the news. And I'll let you have it.
Sure. And I realize I didn't answer the second part of the prior question, which was in terms of access level at departments, who's the final call with that? It rests with the mayor because, you know, these are departments that are making these determinations. So responsibility feeding all the way to the top. So there.
Before you answer Mr. Toomer's questions, what I'm going to ask is that if you all have questions, to choose the one that you're going to ask, because I think almost everyone has questions, or a large majority of you that want you to be able to ask your questions. If you have a second question, Rasheen, will you take note of those so we can please policy, your policy committees.
She said, please.
So as between your questions.
Give me a cup of coffee too.
Or someone else from the policy committee, just so that we can send the rest of the questions from the policy committee. Just one question each, please.
Madam President, being that policy was set afterwards, I have my
The grandfather was the grandfather.
That was good. So I will answer the first one and see if I can stop for a second. The first one had to deal with whether the work of the investigation could stop the possible procurement. And the answer to that is
stop or interfere.
Stop or interfere. Okay, I'm not going to adopt interfere, but yes, you know, the answer to that is yes, for sure. That one of the things that we are intended to do, particularly with the independent procurement review division, is to monitor the solicitation process and identify any red flags. And as a matter of process, what we do is before the reports get finalized and sent to council, they're submitted to the Department of Procurement, which then shares our findings with the user agency. If we found that there was some serious misconduct at some point in the solicitation, and that gets shared with the user agency, it's often then the user agency that then takes that information and says, okay, we should stop here. You know, we may not want to proceed with this potential awardee, given what's gone on. The taint of this procurement is such that we want to kind of pump the brakes on our own. In addition, if we have investigations into actions, one of the reports that we released in the last couple of months involved the sharing of inside information by a city employee with a city vendor, and actually kind of being, it went both ways. So an individual working at a city vendor helped prepare the specification for a city contract in, you know, what was supposed to be a consulting way, but then later participated in that very contract, and the entity with which he was working won. So that, yes, you can't make these things up. So in that case, we made a recommendation as part of our report that that the city stop its contract with that entity because of the taint. So yes, the work of the office can have an impact or interfere with some of the progress of the contract, but we would certainly make the argument that for good ends because there was some problem that we identified. And I don't remember now the second question. I don't want to highlight.
In all fairness, I'm going to go ahead and pass on the second one. Someone else might have asked it.
I will just say on my own that it has not been the gold standard for an Office of Inspector General working in any jurisdiction is that there is cooperation and collaboration and the joint working of the shared goal of government operations with integrity. And that involves, good lines of communication and information back and forth, and we have not been experiencing that.
So you did remember.
Mr. Stevens, you have a question? Mr. Taylor?
Yeah, so I guess maybe it was 2 weeks ago, a lot of this stuff kind of boiled over, came to light at city council meeting. Can you please explain what happened at that meeting, and why you felt it was important to go before city council, and then maybe how that's led you here today?
Sure. So on May 20th, as Mr. Ross alluded to in his public comment, I came before City Council to make an ask that some of those changes that we've been seeking to the legislation, that we get to make those changes because of the experience that we've been having as we've just been trying to do our jobs. That was precipitated because the business day prior, so that Friday before, we found, just in connection with doing routine investigations, 3 documents that raised 3 distinct issues. The first was an email with attachments, so that's 2 of them, where the email was from a city employee who we'd interviewed in connection with an investigation. And that employee was writing to her department's leadership, a commissioner and an executive director who is serving as a deputy commissioner. As requested, attached, please find the summary of my interview with the Office of the Inspector General. So, problem on its face, right? Here we've talked about the integrity of investigations and making sure things are closed, and where we had already received a number of indications and direct testimony from employees that the existence of our investigations was something that was widely known because people would talk about it every time we made a request. That word would travel fast that we'd made a request so that people knew about the existence of the investigation. This email demonstrated that it wasn't just that, but that the substance of our investigation was being shared. And that attachment had the who the city employee met with, the questions that the investigators posed, what her answers were. Right? So, remarkable. It is a remarkable set of circumstances. Been doing this work. I've been in close communication with others in the industry, including the Association of Inspector General, which is the national standard bearer for this. The president of the AIG said, just wow, 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 as I told him what we found. So that, problem 1. Problem 2, in that attachment, it included the fact that the employee had, as she described it, hesitantly provided an email at the request of the investigator. So during the interview, there was some exchange that she described where she said it was by email. Our investigator said, great, do you still have that email? She said, yes. Can you please provide that? And so she did during the interview. Fine. The summary included in its next paragraph that she had hesitantly provided the email. The next paragraph said that she then recalled the email per the advice of this executive director, acting deputy commissioner. So here, an email that, again, the only qualification to us receiving immediate access is supposed to be privilege or confidentiality. There were neither in this email exchange. And yet, you had department leadership giving advice to recall an email, so to keep us from information, evidence, this city record. Now, as it turned out, you can only recall something if the person hasn't opened it. We opened it, so it failed. But the attempt at the recall is so serious, so significant. So that's 2. Within 10 minutes, the investigator also found, just part of normal routine review, email review, an email that was seemed to appear to be discussing the possibility of revoking the limited direct access that we have in the office to some of the city's HR files. So personnel records, employee discipline, et cetera, where the administrator of this program was contacted by this same department leader to say, hey, I'd like a list of all the level of access of everyone in the Office of the Inspector General to this database. My investigators then went and interviewed that individual, and she said, yes, it was clear that there was some discussion and contemplation of revoking access, and I was basically told to stand by. She noted that she thought that that was odd because she was aware that our office had had this access since 2021, so since the beginning. And then her experience that revoking access is limited to individuals who are either leaving city service or changing positions so that they would no longer need that particular information. But that in her experience, she had never had a request where there was a discussion about revoking access to an entire office. And since that email, we found additional documentation that supports that and goes into more detail. And no, the Office of the Inspector General shouldn't be having access to things like people's salary and their disciplinary record and other things that very plainly we need to conduct investigations. So those were 3 problematic things that we found in the span of about 20 minutes on a Friday late morning that, when combined with what we already knew about what was happening to our requests and how things were being dispersed and disclosed, and the various delays and other hurdles that we've been experiencing, that this was a fresh assault that then had such serious implications for us going forward. Because how do we go forward with an interview in the next week even with the thought that anything that we discuss might then be disclosed to leadership? Now, granted, anytime you talk to anyone, there's always that possibility that someone, even though we say, please don't disclose this and keep it confidential, that someone might, like, you know that. But there's one thing where someone kind of takes it on themselves to do that. It's something entirely different, where then they're disclosing this information at the request of department leadership. And so what it means for us, even tactically, to proceed with that interview, is the investigation at a point where we can go ahead with the idea that it could be disclosed. Some investigations may be at that point, but others are in a more sensitive time where, no, you know, how do you go about that investigation, that interview, if you think that it's going to be circulated so widely? So all of these things really present a kind of emergency for the office. I don't use that term lightly. It impacts everything that we do. That same president of the Association of Inspectors General, after I described these 3 things that we found in quick succession, said that this struck him as a once-in-a-lifetime crisis, career lifetime. To which I responded, I certainly hope so, because no one should have to be dealing with this in connection with just doing the job, right? That the office shouldn't have these obstacles for a city that is trying to not be in the same place where it was in 2017. So that's why I went before City Council, because it was an emergency, and I did want to express it in exactly those terms to the body that's in a position to pass legislation to make some changes that will alleviate some of these problems, not all, but some.
And we want to say it is the official position of the board that we support that you went and informed City Council about that. And we are currently working with the mayor's chief of staff to rewrite some of the legislation and provide more power to the Office of the Inspector General.
So I'm going to have a follow-up question for you about that, Richard. But what I want to say is we only have about 5 more minutes, so I'm going to get a couple of questions from this side. And so
I wanted to know.
Discuss it. Hold on, please. So what I will do is I'll send out a form where you guys, if you have questions, please reply to that form with your questions, and we'll format them and get them to the inspector so that she can answer them and have them all in a document. But I'm going to take a couple of questions from this side, because we only have 5 minutes and we do have another significant presentation. Ms. Hawkins, I think Ms. Flowers, you had your hand up. I think Ms. King, you did too. Ms. Lee, do you have a question? Okay. Ms. Hawkins?
Ms. Manigault, mine is real simple. The person who's the subject of the investigation, how much are they entitled to in defense of whatever the allegations?
So how much are they entitled to? So I guess the short would be, at the conclusion of our investigation, the subject of an allegation will receive a final decision and report that is noting the allegation and what our findings were. So that's what's guaranteed to a subject. Besides that, how we engage with the subject really does depend on what the investigation is, right? So let's say the example that I gave about you being accused of stealing from the storeroom. It might be that we have means of conducting that investigation. We were able to discover that you hadn't stolen without even interviewing you or interviewing others, right? So there's not a kind of automatic right to that kind of thing because it might not be pertinent or relevant to a given investigation. So a lot would depend on the circumstances of a given matter and of how we approach individuals. In most circumstances where we have some substantiated finding, or it looks like a substantiated finding of misconduct for an individual, we will attempt to interview that individual, but our interviews are voluntary and so we get turned down.
But if they get a lawyer.
They're entitled to have lawyers. So they're yes. So, individuals are entitled to have personal representation during our interviews, absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So I don't have a question, I just have a little statement.
Okay.
I think that, I think, you know, one of the concerns I have reaching out, I applaud you all for working with the mayor's office, but is this when they created this, was it just a check the box to accommodate the federal government and all the investigations that was happening? Or are they really serious and intentional about addressing the issues that we have in our city government? Because some of these things that are pending us seem to be very low hanging fruit and should not be pending from 23 to now. It's crazy. And so my concern is that is this office of the mayor and our elected officials and others really serious about this office and really getting down to what is happening inside of government. So I support the office general, but this is crazy. This is awful.
Was it Sky or Ms. King that had a question or someone else?
Oh, wait, I wondered.
I want to ask.
Okay, you know what? We've had our calm questions. Ms. Stout, you're one. Go ahead with your one calm question.
I mean, I want her to answer that question.
I just had a comment, but the intentionality.
That is the mayor's sure about.
Yeah,
That's not a question that I.
It's not a question. I think it's a question for us to ask of the mayor's office and elected official as to why would they create this structure, and then although it's a separate entity, but they created it and they signed off on it and not to support it. These pending things are very low hanging fruit, and we know as citizens that it's corrupt. Corruption is still here, and so I think that's a question for the larger elected officials and the mayor's office because this is ridiculous and we should support.
So that kind of leads into my question. You said in the intro, you're getting, not only are you being thwarted, there are big efforts to undermine you further. Is that just these shenanigans of these department commissioners protecting their fiefdom? Or is it city council or both? Who's pushing back on you doing your job?
So I'll say this, we have investigations that touch on all parts of city government. The overwhelming majority are those that fall in city departments. And so when it comes to some of these access questions, those are then ones that are part of the rural departments and feeding up in that direction. And I'd add that these things aren't just one-offs. There are a lot of one-offs where we're finding these kind of extreme examples that are documented, but there are some systemic structural issues. So not just not having direct access period, but we've gotten information from multiple now departments indicating that departments have been told to treat all of our requests like open records requests.
Departments have been told.
But clearly, with open records, that's really great, and transparency, and for Jane Q. Citizen. But we're not Jane Q. Citizen. We're a city agency with a city budget, with a specific charter mandate to investigate fraud, waste, abuse, and corruption in this city government for the benefit of the people. Our requests should not be treated like open records requests, not just because that is in contravention of the immediate access charter, but because it is a very clear hampering hindrance to our work.
We elected a mayor, so is he aware that this could take him out if he don't give you the support?
I think that's the question best asked Khalil, I'm sorry, that's probably a question that's best asked of APAB.
We'll take him out.
Corruption, time is difficult, and for your staff's time.
If I can just say this, like I said, we're here because we want to engage with all the questions. So if any of you have anything after, we also have a sign up in the back for when the meeting is over, and we're going to linger. For those of you who are dismayed by what's happening and want to take steps to support the office, we have a sign up so you can be part of a distribution list, and we have additional materials that both kind of separate some fact from fiction about what has gone on, and also kind of outlines just in a one-pager the stakes.
Such a softie. Go ahead, Mr. Toomer, and Mr. Pesser, do you have a question?
Is there any action that you would like APAB to take?
So in some ways, it's a little bit of a holding pattern, because while the mayor has signaled in a number of ways that there's going to be some legislation pending that, potentially counter to the best goals of our board to have this legislation empower the office, we have received indications that it would do quite the opposite, including a quote from the mayor in the AJC now coming on 2 weeks ago that noted that operational decisions day to day, including from his quote that the decision to even open a case should be run through the board, right? Thank you for that reaction. That's something that should be happening, right? And so that was a signal that this might be something that would be coming in legislation. And so we've just been waiting to see then what the proposed legislation looks like, because the fear is that it's going to do something that will further hurt as opposed to help the office. And it's at that point that the engagement of APAB, of your respective MPUs and community members, that will be the time to come forward and tell your elected officials what you think about its treatment of the Office of the Inspector General.
You don't think it should be proactive, you think it should be reactive?
So, listen, is it possible this will stave off some work? It is absolutely possible. In which case, then the proposed legislative changes that we have would be the ones that our office, as sanctioned by our board, or blessed and not sanctioned, because our office can function independently, or is there to provide cushion, but that the pieces that we want that both kind of give the governing board appropriate level of oversight and give us all the tools that we need to do our jobs, that we could then just propose with that legislation, that form of what should be coming to this office and this city without anything that undermines any of those goals.
So that kind of goes to the question that I was going to ask you, Richard, is as a board member, will you all be able to provide to the appointing bodies for each board member the legislation that you all have agreed to or decided on?
Yes, we absolutely will. We're in the very early innings of that, though. We've just started to have meetings with, mayor's chief of staff.
Kyle, did you have a question?
I do, but before that, comment, I'm confused as to why someone is engaging the mayor or the administration in drafting legislation, since they are not the policy-making body. As stated before, the reason we have this body, governing board as well as the inspector general, is because there were problems in the administration. So going back to try to solve them there, I think is problematic. I understand that there were some pushback to your public comment at the meeting made, but the council should be the ones that are drafting the legislation and seeking a charter amendment if necessary to do so. So my question, we'll start with a quote from the letter that was a response from the COO to your report on the Department of Human Resources Commission. It concluded that we believe the OIG and other compliance organizations should conduct investigations in partnership with the administration to ensure the safeguarding of records. This administration has been in discussion with you on the process to access information that allows for timely response and safeguards those records in accordance with the law and best practices. How did you take that comment in the letter?
I think that comment was in part a response to the policy and procedure recommendations that we issued in connection with the Human Resources Commissioner report, because we highlighted in that report some of the pretty significant obstacles that we encountered that are kind of illustrative of what I've been talking about, including to have to go to one of her direct reports to get things that we needed, like the commissioner's personnel file and the daughter's personnel file from this individual who reports directly to the commissioner. There's just no way that didn't know. And we heard from her former deputy that, oh yeah, she knew all about your investigation early on, which probably then explains why the various requests for meetings to talk about access. I included in the report a June request for a meeting to discuss access, a follow-up then in August requesting a meeting. Hey, just following up. We've got a few investigations that are sensitive in nature. Can we discuss the possibility of direct access? No response, no response. Scene, we just following up a month later to her with a copy to that same COO and chief of staff, and no response. So the idea of, oh, we're blindsided. I've been trying to have an audience and engage about these issues and to have no response to a request for a meeting. And the idea that the administration is engaging the board, but not the office, about the issues facing the office should raise a red flag to everyone in the room. That the board is there to protect against the political interference and give us some insulation, and to not have us in the room, to not engage, really looks like it is exactly that kind of interference that is going on that shouldn't be happening. And to your observation about why is the mayor then crafting this legislation, I think that gives you a lot of the answers that you're alluding to.
Thank you, Ms. Manigault, so much for your time. We appreciate you. So again, you said there are signups if people want to
sign up in the group, and we're going to hang out. So we've got a sign up. I don't want to interfere with the rest of the meeting, but we're available at the end to give resources. We've got stickers, we've got report cards, things for you to bring back to your NPUs, because we want this message to be spread.
Yes. So much.
Thank you very much.
So for APAB in itself, I feel like this continue to be a very long discussion. So if there is an action that we would like to take as a group, if you have one, you can make make a motion or a recommendation, or what we can do is I can refer this to policy committee so they can do some more deep dive and come back to APAB next month with a recommendation on how APAB should move forward in support of the independence of the Inspector General's office. I see the question, Kyle, so what's the question?
It wasn't a question, just contemplating whether or not we're prepared and want to spend the time to craft what specifically we're going to be doing, or if there's not super urgency, if we allow it to go through committee where we can have that time and come back with something that is hopefully more effective and thought through and can be more targeted than a general, we support the Office of Inspector General.
Well, my statement of that was for you all to come back with something.
Correct.
I'll add that there is a certain level of urgency in getting out what we would want to get out first.
Who's the sign?
You can talk to them about what you signed. Mailing list, it's a mailing list, mailing list. Sorry. So,
Madam Chair, do we need to go on the record as that we support the independence of the OIG? Are we all assuming that, or do we need to vote on that? Or do we
would.
Please.
I'm sorry, but parliamentarian had a family event, so, but that's why I said you can make a motion.
Can I make a motion? Yeah. I make a motion that it goes to committee to find out how can we support the Office of the Inspector General in our role as APAB, and then come up with that finding, and then we decide on how we want to move forward with that support, and also keeping into communication with the board of the Office Inspector around what is happening with their work that they're doing. With the committee, what they're doing around the mayor.
Ms. Flowers, was that the whole motion?
That was a long motion. I wanted to focus on two things. How can we, APAB, support them? And how can it stay in continuous feedback conversation with the Office of Inspector General Board, Governance Board?
Ms. Flowers?
Yes.
If I may. Would it be important within that motion to state that we are in support of the independence of that office?
Yes.
So would you add that?
Yes, and we are in support of the Office of Inspector General, APAB.
The independence.
independent?
That's a lot. Wait, that's it.
There's a second.
There's a second.
Second.
So there's been a motion and a second.
Point of order.
Yes, sir.
Since there was quite a big discussion with that, is it possible to just restate the motion clearly?
Yeah.
And so make sure the second stands.
I could.
So, Ms. Flowers, I will ask you about your second part of that motion. I would either ask that you do two motions or, I would ask.
I do two motions.
So the first one.
I was gonna make the same
Okay,
recommendation.
so my first motion is that we, this item, the Office of Inspector General conversation be sent to the policy committee to investigate, to research how we can support them. First motion.
Second.
So you asked about stating, because, so I understand what you're saying, Mr. Toomer, Ms. Stout, but I think by saying that how we can support, well, actually, that's not the same as saying that we actually support.
So how can we support them and advocate?
It's a separate one, a second motion coming.
So that motion is intended to just figure out how do we support them, because right now, I don't know we clearly about how do we support them as a body. So it's just a research conversation, so.
Recommendations.
We refer it to the committee.
Madam Chair, point of order. I believe that the motion that's standing, there are going to be two motions. So I believe that her motion is to kick it to committee.
Right.
Generally speaking, and we have a second on that. So I believe we should hear that motion first and then go to the second motion.
That's where we're doing that. That's what we're appointed discussion. So I was just asking the question, but we have a motion to to refer to committee. Try to make sure I phrase this correctly on, so that they can determine ways that APAB can support the Office of the Inspector General. The independence of the Office of Inspector General. Okay. So that's been the motion by Ms. Flowers. It was seconded by Ms. Stout, I think. Is that correct? Yes. So, Mr. Timmer? The second one is by Mr. Timmer? Is that what you're saying? Okay, because I know we've done this 3 times now. So the second one was by Mr. Timmer. Is there any discussion? All right, so we'll take a vote. I know, we're not in order, so.
Let me just name it.
Okay,
This helpful, but I need 1 second, please, if you don't mind.
Okay. And they ready for a second, we gotta vote on that.
Huh?
We gotta vote on this one first.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm ready. Ms. Glover? Yes. Mr. Schuler?
Yes.
Mr. Stern?
Yes.
Mr. Barnett?
Yes.
Mr. Toomer?
Yes.
Mr. Sears?
Yes.
Mr. Taylor?
Yes.
Ms. Khalil?
Yes.
Ms. Stout?
Yes.
Mr. Kessler?
Yes.
Mr. Hunter?
Same.
Mr. King?
Yes.
Ms. King, I'm sorry. Okay. Oh, what was that? What was your answer?
Ms. King?
Yes. Yes. Mr. Son?
Yes.
Ms. Steins?
Yes.
Ms. Flowers?
Yes.
Mr. Dodds?
Abstain.
Ms. Lee?
Yes.
Ms. Hawkins West? Ms. Snapchat?
Yes.
And I abstain. Passes 78, 0 nays, 3 abstentions. All right, so you have a second
My
motion?
second part of, my second motion, request is that we, APAB, stay in communication with the Office of Inspector General Board, Governance Board, around the legislation, well, the work group that they have around creating legislation for the Inspector General access.
Is there a second?
Is that clear? So for APAB to stay in communication with the Office of Inspector General's Governance Board around the work group they have for legislation, for, I guess, access to documentation that they need.
I don't know, does that need a motion?
I was gonna ask if we
What
needed
is
that,
that?
or if the representative who's here, who we have appointed or nominated, could just take that as his charge to relay information.
Yeah.
But that, the second was from Amy, second
Supposed
motion.
to support it.
What? I thought the primary reason I raised my hand is to go on the record. APAB supports the independence of the
That's the
office.
third, that's the
Oh,
next,
that's
that's
the third one?
it was still one thing, we gotta have that, and for us to import, and for us to support the independent, arm of the Office of the Inspector General.
So that motion's coming from the staff,
Yes,
correct?
that'd be her.
So then, at this point, we haven't had a second for that motion, so then go ahead.
If that's the way that, if Richard is going to be agreeing to do that with us, we can take that motion off the table.
I think this is role, so
Yeah.
I don't think that motion is necessary. I'm sorry, Ms. Stout, you said that you had a motion.
The one for the independent.
My motion is that APAB supports the independence of the Office of Inspector General. Just a vote upon. These too many words. I just want to go on the record. We support the independence of the Office of Inspector General.
That's second.
That's just straight up.
All right, so there has been a motion from Ms. Stout, and the motion is for us to take a vote on well, actually, I want to say to take a vote. The motion is that APAB express support of the independence of the Office of Inspector General. There's been a second by Ms. Flowers. Is there any discussion?
The first was to refer the matter to policy. The second is to express support of the independence.
And that was my question before, was that inferred in that first motion was the fact that there was support, but there's no actual, it was how we can support and not an actual statement of support. So that's the difference. Kyle, your question.
So the question is, once, whatever the outcome of this vote is, the AP advise us what your typical process or who gets that communication and whether or not we should include in the motion where that information goes, or is it we just take whatever action, or the Inspector General and other folks who are here take that action, or that we are asking Leah to disseminate this motion to other parties?
I can answer that question. Thank you, Mr. Kessler. So what we have done effectively as of last year, when we began working on the process of routing recommendations, is that the board would, in their motion, include who the communication would go to, and we would then route it accordingly. The board doesn't necessarily have to be specific in terms of naming people. We send it to we send all APAB communications to the city council and to the mayor's office and to whoever else you point out. So all the communications go to the city council and the mayor's office, and then whoever else you name in your motion for us to route it to.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
So is there a friendly amendment or a request for a friendly amendment to Stout's motion, or? So any other discussion or questions? All right, so what's that question?
So we're not gonna amend the motion, we're just making a statement that's not.
It's going to the mayor and the city council.
It will automatically go to the,
Oh,
To
for
mayor.
the city council and mayor, okay, that's the normal process.
Yes, that's the normal
Oh,
process.
thank you.
And then anyone additional to that, like if it were, for example, a Parks and Rec matter, and you wanted it to go to Commissioner Cutler, you would name in your motion that you want to express support of blah, 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 by sending communication to the Department of Parks and Recreation. We would then send it to Commissioner Cutler, to the council, and to the mayor's office. For example.
So I do make a motion to amend the motion on the table to also send this communication to the inspector.
Yes.
I was gonna presume they would be copied, but just to be safe. So, Ms. Stout, do you accept that amendment?
Yeah.
All right, so any other discussion or questions on the motion? All right, we'll take a vote. Yes, Ms. Glover?
Abstain.
Mr. Schulman?
Yes.
Mr. Thurman?
Yes.
Mr. Barnett?
Yes.
Sorry. Mr. Toomer?
Yes.
Mr. Sears?
Yes.
Mr. Taylor?
Yes.
Ms.
Balil, yes.
Ms. Stout?
Yes.
Mr. Kessler?
Yes.
Same.
Ms. King? Yes. Mr. Hassan?
Yes.
Ms. Stein?
Yes.
Ms. Flowers?
Yes.
Ms. Dodds?
Abstain.
Ms. Lee?
Yes.
Ms. Hawkinson?
Yes.
Ms. Paczynski?
Yes.
And I abstain. 16 yes, 4 abstentions. And so the motion passes, 16 yeas, 0 nays, 4 abstentions. All right, thank you all. We'll move to the next order of business. All right, so we have a presentation regarding the 2024 Strategic Planning Report from Randy Gibbs, the Sizemore Group. Just as context, you know that this is the second part of our strategic planning process, and we had our second retreat on May 15th, was it? 18th, thank you. And so Randy and team are here to give us recap, but also you all should receive materials so that you can have that recap and to advise on next steps.
What am I doing here?
Switch on the side.
Switch on the side. Awesome.
And thank you, Sizemore, for your patience while we got together presentation.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning, good morning, good morning. I wish I was sorry, clapping. All right, so Randy Gibbs again, I like the energy and feeling victorious. I am presenting to you today our initial recommendations for your strategic plan. So I'm excited about that, excited to be a part of this.
Oh, you know, when they call me.
Oh, no problem. All right, so we are the Sizemore Group. I'm representing Sizemore Group. We are an architecture firm, interior design, placemaking, and Ashley and I, the lovely Ashley who's sitting in the rear. We are part of the planning team. Our team is on the left. Your team is on the right. So been very fortunate to have been working with Ms. Leah, Ms. Morgan, Mr. Lance, and Mr. Kip in the back. Their team has been fantastic, and so excited about that. I've been told that I only have 10 minutes, and so that's the reason why I'm rushing, all right? But I want to make sure that we cover the strategic process and then the recommendations in the end. So what we've heard from the beginning is that APAB really wants to enhance its relevancy across the city of Atlanta, and so that's been a major focus of ours. We also heard that APAB wants to improve its effectiveness at working together as a team. And so that was something that we honed in on as well as delivering actionable items coming out of the strategic planning effort. And so that's what we have focused on and hope to deliver upon. We looked at the ordinance that APAB is built on. And so with this, we looked at it as the guiding document and said, okay, well, what is APAB supposed to do? And so it's supposed to speak on citywide issues, but it really is responsible for the preparation and updating of the Comprehensive Development Plan, the CDP. And so that's kind of how we looked at the focus of APAB. And then also, who is it supposed to talk to? It's supposed to talk to the mayor, it's supposed to talk to city council. Okay, and so as we looked at, as we considered all things, this was our baseline. And so we're gonna recap right quick our process. Certainly, we spent some time at the gathering spot. Gathering spot was a cool place to meet, not because of where it is, but the fact that it was outside of here. And so it gave APAB members an opportunity to see different parts of Atlanta, perhaps. It also gave APAB members a chance to not sit in the same rows, sitting next to new people, meeting new folks. And we come to find that you really did appreciate that. At the beginning of our process, we conducted some interviews from some individuals identified by your leadership team. And those interviews, some of these highlights of some of the good things that are happening at APAB and some of the challenges per se. And so some of the good things is that there's a lot of untapped potential within this body, within this organization. And again, APAB really wants to matter, and it's full of people who really, really love the city, really, really love your neighborhoods and the MPUs that you represent. Some concerns that have been addressed in the pre-interviews, the pre-retreat interviews, were that it's not seen as effective, it's not seen as a serious body, that the planning is too reactionary, and that that APAB needs a little bit more focus. So this is the content that helped us frame the retreat itself. We also conducted a pre-retreat survey. So many of y'all participated in it. Thank you very much. And in that, we heard many of the same things. In that you really, really love being a part of this process of this board because of the diversity of this board, the people you get to meet. So, and then there's also this feeling of you're a part of this board out of, to some degree, obligation, right? Because if you weren't here, nobody would be representing your community or your MPU that you come from. But you also feel as if this is an opportunity to positively impact the development and the nature of your communities. So Then we had a retreat, and the retreat was full of a lot of energy and a lot of spiritness, so I certainly appreciate for everyone to show down. The spirit that was there, because what it did reflect was the passion of the folks who were, who came.
That was Michael.
That was Michael.
He was so happy to be there, weren't you, Michael?
All right, only got 10 minutes, All right, and so this was the agenda, a power-packed agenda, and so I'm excited about that. The objective that we try to hit was to identify key action items, identify the action audience, and action planning, creating a calendar or just an agenda moving forward, and then identify an action team. Reason why, again, that we emphasize action so much is because coming from the survey as well as coming from the interviews, there was a lot of conversation about, hey, we really want to be about doing things. We want to be about action. And so with that, we conducted our retreat. We focused on a conversation on this book, Urban Alchemy. And so with that, there is some, I think you're getting books at some point, but from Urban Alchemy, we came up with some of these highlights. We also had a conversation on some big boards. We had city focus, and then we had some focus areas. So city issues and focus areas, and again, recapping these here about where we want to focus. And then we did some homework, had some worksheets. The worksheets were very informative for those who filled it out, so thank you very much, in terms of where you think we needed to provide. And a lot of these are dovetailing. We're essentially did the same assessment 3 or 4 times, just to get the root of some of the issues that you saw pertinent to the city. We did a personality and a team assessment. And this is interesting. So not everybody filled it out, I get it. Thank you for those who did. For those who did, we did recognize that there are a lot of the same type of characteristics, right? Everybody here is an E. Everybody who filled it out was an E. Somebody sent me their former Myers-Briggs, and they're an I, and then everyone here is also an A. So you're extroverted and you're assertive, okay? So that's kind of the nature of the critical mass of folks who completed this. And it just talks about what might be of interest, what might work in terms of not only the teaming, but then where you spend a little bit of focus. Okay, and so these are some descriptions as it pertains to the characteristics from the 16 personalities that was provided. And then we'll get into our recommendations. So these were our guiding thoughts, that there's a limited purpose per the enabling ordinance. Okay, and that limited purpose really is focused on comprehensive planning, citywide issues, and then the primary audience, as we said again, mayor, city council, and then city department heads, based on the nature of what we do here at APAB. And then you also represent, there is a representative nature of APAB, and that is of multiple MPUs. So not just one MPU, but multiple MPUs. And then APAB board members are mostly extroverted. You saw they care deeply for the city. They're energetic but busy. Y'all are busy people listening to a lot of different issues, but busy all the same, not only in city work, but in your own personal lives, but you believe that there's an opportunity to do great things in Atlanta. So we came up with really 2 strategic goals based off of enhancing the relevancy. So you got sub goal 1 here, reestablish APAB's purpose, and that's just an ongoing campaign to tell the city who APAB is. All right, it's an ongoing campaign to tell the city who it is. So continue to push that out, creating a simplified 1-pager plan, a 1-pager position paper. In your white folders, you'll see examples of that. So on the right-hand side, you'll see an example of a past resolution that's been converted in a manner that should be a little bit more palatable for people to understand. And so that's an example of what a 1-pager could look like, should you put something like that out. And then establish focus areas. Those focus areas are really based on the CDP. So the CDP has community work program items, community engagement, future land use map, so on and so forth. And so we really think that if you frame out the focus areas of APAB on the comp plans, you'll have a lot to hit on. All right, 30 seconds. Second strategic goal, develop an onboarding process. We got here because people come to APAB through different means, and so making sure that everyone understands the purpose of APAB and understands the bylaws and the guiding principles, so on and so forth. We wanted to make sure that was part of the conversation, develop a communication schedule so that folks know when and how they should be able to receive communication from APAB, and then establish a social in-person agenda. That not only speaks to the extroversion and the high energy that you get, the camaraderie within the group, but it also speaks to the opportunity for you to get to know each other and get to see other parts of the city, right? And so having, so these are the two strategic goals that we put forward, all right? And so again, also in your package on the right-hand side, you should see a couple things. One is a scorecard. So behind the agenda, you'll see a scorecard. And in there, you know, I know I was kind of breezing this pretty fast, but that is full out. It's an Excel. There you go. There you go. So it looks like this. I've never been Vanna White, but this is my best. You don't have to glory is? No. Maybe you think more. But anyway, with that being said, using a scorecard like that to track the accomplishments, to track where you're going, you know, just all the tasks that are associated with this. We think the tasks that are associated on that scorecard are actual, practical, tangible activities that you can do over the course of the next 3 to 6 months. And then you track that over the course of the year. That will help determine your progress. That will help determine your progress towards the strategic plan. And then over the course of the next 36 months, you know, continue to look at those the initial strategic scorecard items, but then also look at the specific inclusion of other planning efforts. We know that there's transportation plans, you know, there's parks and trails plans, things of that nature. Being directly a part of that is important. Establishing equitable benefit from some of the major events that come to the city of Atlanta. That should be important. And then revising the ordinance. There was a conversation that we had last month about perhaps the ordinance does not contain all the things that it should, you know, the cities of all the ordinance has it. So let's make sure that we revise the ordinance. So that could be an activity over the next 36 months that you get after. And then we also noticed that there were several volunteer advisory groups across the country. Perhaps there's an opportunity for APAB to be a leader in convening those groups and then exercising best practices. So I tried to get that in 10 minutes. I failed, but I thank you for your attention. I hope that is helpful. Was it helpful?
Yeah, super helpful.
Well, then thank Ashley for keeping it. And any part that was terrible is my fault, so.
This is good. This is good.
Really? All right, so I got 5 minutes.
Mr. Schluter.
Look, I was not there because I was out of town, but I read this earlier and I was like, what is this? This is awesome. This position because I can't understand the zoning stuff that comes out of the committee, whereas clauses, I just can't, I'm sorry. So, are we in a position to adopt these recommendations today? Because I think they're spectacular.
Yeah.
So those have already been.
I will make a motion if I'm allowed to. I just think these position papers are, want to go to the city and the city executive, you want them to pay attention, you give them this.
Yes. So I am looking for a motion to adopt the strategic planning recommendations, but I wanted to have discussion questions first. Any other questions or discussion? What?
He coming back? Yeah, we like him.
He coming back?
We like him.
I just want to give Jack his jacket. This is unbelievable presentation, unbelievable follow-up, unbelievable planning. How can we work this in with a lot of things that are going on in the city. I know you're a private entity, correct? Are you private?
I am private, I don't live.
Because after the Inspector General's presentation, I just feel like there's some synergy between the two of you to get some of the stuff done, because I'm not throwing it out there, I'm just saying you need help. And this is unbelievable. I'm not saying it like that, I'm just saying that what he did for us, there's so much we can utilize in what he did for us with other things that we're doing as an APAB group. That's all I'm saying.
So I will say they gave a whole list of recommendations and we will be.
One page.
Yeah, so we will be, I will be asking for a motion to adopt those recommendations. We're just answering questions and giving feedback right now. And so it's up to us as a group to decide how to implement that. This is out and then Ms. Hawkins.
Yeah, I just hope we can translate what he's given us to make us effective
Yeah.
to advocate
For her, exactly.
or whatever situation comes up. Because we sit here in the jar, no windows on a Saturday and say we support the Office of the Inspector General, but does that do anything? How can we make it do something?
Thank you for saying it much more eloquently than.
No, I'm not saying that.
I'm new here, so just forgive my passion and my energy.
I'm saying the same thing. Oh.
Ms. Hawkins?
Yeah, I'm with Joe. I missed the retreat. ACRB had a conflict that day. Who put this paper together?
So that is the point paper, the position paper.
Transform one of Jim's things.
I mean, I know, I worked
I did the remix. Don't call me Buck Daddy. I did the remix. But the original was already out there.
Well, no, from the committee that met Mondays, the first Monday every month, but this is such a different work. That's why I'm asking, how's this?
Yeah, so I did that. But it's the same thing.
How does that help us do that?
Yeah.
It's an example. Give you a template, Ms. Gloria. So what he's suggesting, I'll be the Randy translator. Okay. What he's suggesting is that instead of the previous resolutions that you all would produce, you could instead produce a position paper which accomplishes
Everything.
actually not the same thing, but it accomplishes something better because it prompts people to actually read it and digest it.
This is the template. I got this.
They only gave me 10 minutes. So if I were the Inspector General, maybe I have.
Hey, Inspector General, come here.
Well, I thought you would have more questions and feedback. I really didn't expect.
Sorry, one more question.
Hold on. Mr. Schumer. Ms. Simon, did you have a question?
Go ahead, on this side.
Oh, very good.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome, sir.
Very important work. Caveat. I would recommend that as a group, APAB take and highlight apply a timetable to the most important items within this package, because being realistic and knowing the time that each of us are, I do not see us achieving this goal in a year. So we have to parse it out, and my motion would be that we receive this in its entirety. Okay. I yield, I'm finished.
So, Mr. Schumer, to your question, the adoption of the recommendation.
It wasn't a question.
It was a statement, I'm sorry. Keep me honest, thank you. The adoption of the recommendations is not saying that we're going to get this accomplished, I'm sorry, in a year. This is saying that these are recommendations that we need to incorporate into our strategic plan. And then the governance committee or the governance working group or a strategic plan working group would then work out those details, like the timelines, and come back and say, this is what we recommend, how we recommend that we implement these recommendations. It's a two-part process. Does that make sense?
Oh, it clearly makes sense. But I'll let the motion go to, my neighbor.
Mr. Hunter?
Madam Chair, a motion. I'd like to make a motion that we accept the recommendations from the Seismo Group and that we request that the Department of City Planning, Office of Neighborhood Planning, create an implementation schedule for our next meeting that we can then adopt and or make a part of the agenda for the next working group. I think we need that schedule so that we can hold each other accountable.
I second that.
Thank you for that motion and then second to that, Mr. Hassan. Question for you, Mr. Hunter, is that two separate motions? Is one, is that a caveat?
No, we're accepting it, but then I'm also giving you the plan. So if people agree, the plan is already there. That, similar like we did last year, they come back with a schedule for us, and then we can then synthesize it that way and, eat the elephant one bite at a time.
Yes.
Just curious, I thought the plan was 3 years. Is it 1 year or 3 years? 3, okay.
So, yeah, it's
what-
3 year plan. But then there's also 3 years with targets.
Yeah, over the first year.
And 12-month target.
Yes.
Well, you have a 12-month target, and you have a 3-month,
Yeah.
36-month target.
So there's been a motion on the floor to adopt the strategic plan recommendations and have Department of City Planning, Office of Neighborhoods create a timeline for those recommendations. It's been seconded by Mr. Hassan. Is there a question on the motion or discussion? Ms. Hutchinson?
What having planning do the timetable versus having a representative body group from this body, what's your thinking why planning could do it as well or better?
Just based on Madam Vice President last year, we attempted to do it, and then we sat around for 2 or 3 months. I guess it's a new thing, but once we actually made the motion to pass it them, the very next month, they came back with a plan for us, and then we really went into implementation following the plan. But every step of the way, we had to be in agreement, and we moved forward. And I think that, as I said in the presentation, we all are very busy. I constantly see you on Channel 26. I think that they're a resource, they're here, they can create the schedule. If we don't like it, we can send it back. But I think it just be a good way to make sure we get a good head start. He's pretty much already outlined, gave us low-hanging fruit, the 12-month schedule. I would like to see that synthesized like we did before, the 2 to 3 months categories. And then that's what I'm asking for, the shell of it, in terms of how we can go about accomplishing the goals and the things that it said. And I just think that they can do it for us.
Can we build in an intermediate step so that their plan, whatever you come up with, comes through the governance committee first before it comes to the whole? In order to kind of cut the discussion in this group?
We're happy to do that with or without a motion.
Mr. Schultner?
That was my comment and alignment. I thought that they were giving it to us and that we should look at it in the governance committee and not just hand it off to the city and say, work something out and then come back to us and we'll figure it out. I think we should figure it out first.
Mindy, where are the recommendations contained in this?
They're in the white folder, man.
I'm in the white folder.
Page 23,
The general presentation.
Mr. Schumer?
Maybe a compromise would be that we do what the motion says, but add to it that it go to the governance committee for the first approval and recommendation back to the entire body.
Takes the work out of it. If I may. I think Mr. Hunter's motion, coupled with Ms. Skoczynski and Mr. Schultz's recommendation, prevents the board from having to do that work. It puts the work on your resource, which is planning. And then still has y'all doing the work of reviewing it, editing it, making whatever changes you think need to be made. Please know that we are not looking for extra work. So if you all prefer to do it, that's fine. And we'll still support you either way. We'll still support you.
Right.
Yeah, if you all want to do it, that's fine.
Right.
Yeah, if y'all want to do it, that's fine.
That was my thought too, was that it goes to the governance committee, because DCP is at those meetings anyways, providing support, and if it's a working group, a dedicated working group, that those resources would still be there. So I think it's, which do you want to happen first? Do you want planning to provide a sample timeline that we can work from? Or do you want governance committees to start from scratch and create our own timeline with the help of DCP?
So, I'm putting on my parliamentary hat. The motion in of itself says at the next meeting that we want something that we can, before us, that can be voted on as a schedule, a shell. There's nothing in that motion precluding you in our next part, referring this to the governance committee and then requiring them to come to you all for the next meeting. Just to put that out there.
Thank you for
It
that.
does not preclude that. So the motion itself is just really saying, we accept this, DCP via Office of Neighborhood Planning, please create the schedule like you did to us previously, that we all loved. That's all the motion says.
Okay.
It doesn't say that you can't go here, can't go there, can't do that. So if that's a step, in our next order of business, we have new items of consideration, you can refer the same item to the governance committee, and then that requires them to come before you all.
If I may add, the only other thing I would point out is that if the governance committee if that motion were to fail and the governance committee does the work and has it prepared for the July meeting, that means that you all will have to have multiple meetings before your July APAB meeting. So just keep that in mind. You guys are gonna have to have meetings and do work and stuff. I'm just saying.
Well, we're going to planning and zoning.
NPU, LRB, and DRB, BZA, and everything else. We have 40 hours a week with, a decent sized staff.
You work 40 hours.
They do. No, I'm just kidding. I'm kidding.
So
None of us.
60 hours.
So what I'd like to say is that I appreciate the sentiment, and there is a motion on the table of what you're saying, Ms. LaRue. And I think that you have a group of people that are dedicated to getting this done. And so while the energy is good and while the ideas are flowing, we need to capture as much of that as possible. So with that being said, like the clarity that Mr. Hunter provided on his motion, there's nothing that precludes the governance committee from meeting and working on this. So with that being said, there's a motion on the floor. Is there any discussion or questions about the motion?
I don't know if it's a question, but the summit that they had last year, there was no follow between the year. So are we going to see Sizemore Group to follow up in 6 months on our productivity, or are we going to wait for another year to kind of check what we're doing?
That's not included in the scope of work.
Okay.
So we have to be accountable for ourselves at this point, because this is our strategic plan.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you might have seen the work will go to DCP and then we will review it as the governance committee?
No. The motion on the floor is to adopt the strategic plan recommendations and have DCP, Office of Neighborhoods, create a timeline of those recommendations.
What about the governance committee as part of that? Just review.
That's not part of the motion. That is our work, but that's not part of the motion. That's not what this is about, the adoption of the recommendations and creating a timeline. If you don't.
No, I was just trying to figure out if I needed to put something else on this.
Okay, so we're ready for a vote. I'm going to put this out as this. Are there any objections to that motion? Yeah, that's right.
That's, I wish there were
Yeah.
two separate motions, the recommendation and then the other one.
Right, that's fine. All right, so, let's go ahead with the vote then. Ms. Glover,
Yes.
Mr.
No.
Mr. Thurman,
Yes.
Ms. Barnett, I mean,
Yes.
Mr. Barnett,
Yes.
Mr. Toomer. I've been
Yes.
doing it all already, Mr. Barnett. Mr. Sears,
Yes.
Mr. Taylor,
Yes.
Ms. Khalil,
Yes.
Ms. Stout,
Yes.
Mr. Kessler,
Yes.
Mr. Hunter,
In favor.
Ms. King,
Yes.
Mr. Hassan,
Yes.
Ms. Steins,
Yes.
Ms. Flowers,
Yes.
Mr. Dodds,
Yes.
Ms. Lee,
Yes.
Ms. Hawkins, Ms. Skopchinsky.
I'm voting with Mr. Schleifer.
Okay, and, abstain. Seventeen, 2
Yep.
All right, so the motion passes, 17 yeas, 2 nays, 1 abstention. Thank you, Mr. Gibbs and the Sizemore Group. And Randy, I just want to say, I didn't take the test because as you and I discussed, I took it already. So, yeah, so I'm an architect. I just want y'all to know. So anyone else that has not taken the personality assessment, I would really appreciate it if you did so, of course, at your own leisure. To get more of a gauge of how and when to put people together to work and where your strengths lie.
So
in your.
it's not anonymous.
I have.
Last time I took one of these tests, I got fired. You know that whole outspoken thing?
All right. So the link to the assessment is still up. So if you do want to take it for your own sake, feel free to take it for a little while longer. And then also have, I know I brought this last Urban Alchemy, and I do like Dr. Fullo's work. Many of you during, recent events heard this book, The Color of Law. And so this was a book that was very indicative of how structural racism and that type of thing manifests itself in planning and in the built environment. This is a follow-up book that I just found, Just Action. And so it speaks to some of the solutions that Richard Rothstein and his daughter Leah Rothstein have discussed. I've only gotten so far because that's what my handy dandy bookmark is indicating. But at the end of the day, I would recommend y'all looking at these books. And if you are interested in any other books as it pertains to urban planning or whatnot, we're happy to help. And if we can help in any other way in terms of small area plans or community plans for your communities, your neighborhoods, your use, feel free to reach out to the Sizemore Group. Our card is in your package for a reason.
Thank you so much.
What was the first book?
Urban Alchemy, man.
And let's please give Ashlyn a big round of applause for all.
Yeah,
All right, we have 16 minutes and we don't want to, have to ask for 5 more minutes. We're gonna go ahead and get through our next order of business, which are standing committee reports. From the governance committee, the first thing that we are still working on is the bylaws working group. Mr. Kyle Kessler, we need the edited bylaws. If you can send those, please, that would be amazing, so that we can continue that work. And so, he physically acknowledged, yes, he will send those over. And then I received an email. There is a commission called the Elected Officials Compensation Commission that is actually being reinstated in council on June 17th. And so they're asking us to provide a representative. I don't think we have to provide a representative by the 17th. They're just letting us know that commission is being reinstated. And Mr. Toomer, I was informed that you were previously the APAB representative for that. Is that correct?
I don't remember.
Yes.
I appointed you.
We told on you.
I see you're leaning back. Is that your way of saying that you are no longer interested in being?
No, I would, so.
Okay. Yes. So that's an appointment, so I don't think I have to ask for a vote. But I will anyway, just because I like the democratic process. Go ahead, Mr. Kessler.
So just, if it's not abundantly clear for the name of that commission, so every 4 years before
Yes.
the municipal election, they have to convene elected officials compensation committee to decide the salaries of the mayor, council, and council president. So they do a review of other municipalities, sort of compensation studies, whatever else can come forth with recommendations. There are times when the city council accepts those recommendations. There are times when they decline such recommendations, and there's times where elected officials themselves choose to defer their compensation to charities and other sort of things. But by law, by charter, I think we have to have this quadrennial review of compensation.
So it's only during 2 years, it's a short appointment. Yeah, that's what I thought. But I heard years.
No, I said that it was an appointment with the term, the appointees shall serve with a term of office expiring with the regular municipal elections, meaning the term will expire next year.
This year.
Next year, 25.
November.
Municipal elections.
Regular.
Regular election is not special, well, not special elections, but, so November of next year, November of 2025. So.
I'm talking to myself.
So are there any questions? All right, so are there any objections to Eric Toomer continuing to represent APAB on the elected officials' compensation?
Is he gonna be a shark?
Actually, just from history, our elected officials are way underpaid based on the last time.
Yeah.
And we were able to bump them up. But like Kyle said, many of them, when we voted to bump them up, declined. And some gave them to charity, some just, so many.
Wow. That is very interesting. I'm trying to pay it in.
All right, so seeing no objections except for Mr. Toomer, we're not gonna pay attention to that. We have unanimous consent. So we still have a vacancy on ACRB for MPU's G through L. So if those representatives
That's not
put
us.
the word out, ask for recommendations, I'll send a letter out to those that aren't MPU chairs, but please follow up and look out for those. And then I have sent you all a link for a Google form. The governance committee, when we met, discussed whether or not we should continue meeting on the third Saturday. Ms. LaRue let us know that there were 4 dates that have opened up through some shifting of MPU schedules. And so in that link, there are 2 dates that we have suggested and put forth. So or recurrences, let me not say dates, it's not individual dates. It's recurrences, including the third Saturday. So if you all look at that, vote on that, and then we will make an announcement on what the new schedule will be. And the reason I did it via poll is so that being conscious of time, so that we're not having long drawn out debates about what your preferences are. Just indicate your preferences. There's room to give feedback in the forum or whatever, or thoughts about a particular date. And then what we can do is then make sure that gets public. I think what we can do is, it is through February 2025, because that will help us keep continuity through our next election cycle. But we can say that whatever, we'll announce the new occurrence at the July meeting to be effective in August. And Ms. Hines, you have a question?
2 questions. One, we'll be meeting in the same room if we did it on any date. Would it be the same room? And then 2, traffic and parking for 6:30 at night.
The room, I can't answer that question. I don't know. I don't know if the space is available. I don't see why it
At
wouldn't
night,
be.
at night, yeah.
I don't see why it wouldn't be, but I can't answer that without looking.
And so we're not, our indication is just that we would have to say City Hall, we wouldn't have to indicate it.
The room.
And then for 6:30, we felt like 5:30 or 6 o'clock was too early, but we also didn't want to start too late and then have a 2-hour meeting go late into the evening. So it was kind of that midway. Ms. Hawkins,
If you'll repeat the tentative dates that were out there, just.
I did, that would go on the, and you were in the meeting, so.
My recollection is the first, the third Monday
No.
and the fourth Thursday.
Mr. Hassan?
I'm just curious about fourth Wednesdays, because NPW's shifted, so we opened up fourth Wednesdays. Is that deemed to not be an option because of another conflict or what? Because if it was the NPU's moving some of their dates allowed these to be cleared, NPW just did that as well, which is why I was wondering why that wasn't on there.
Where's Thursday?
The fourth Wednesday.
There was, City Planning gave us 4 dates that were open based on their very wide review of all the dates in the calendar of all different meetings of all types. And those are the 4 dates.
Yeah, and so of those 4 dates, I don't know how much of a majority we would be able to get 4 dates. That was the discussion, and so we chose 2 dates. And again, if none of those 3 dates that are listed, the 2 options plus the continued third Saturday, you can indicate that in feedback that, you have a preference of a particular date or whatever, or provide some feedback, but we're trying to make this as simple as possible instead of more complex. Mr. Hunter?
I was just gonna talk to the parking seats that usually 6:30 will be in City Hall. There usually is plenty of parking even in front of City Hall, deck, and there are several decks around here. So the parking is actually usually there.
That's still paid parking in front of City Hall, right?
It's paid in the front, but on the side, usual park there is no indication that, or sign that says you can't park here.
Is that the one that says for media?
Yeah, but I think that might have been. I don't think that's there.
I think I think we're getting away.
It's research, I think the state was research.
Yeah. Mr. Kessler?
So I appreciate the simplicity, I was just curious if before to do the typical, or we could switch it to more like a ranked choice where we could give a preference rather than just choosing one of them. If not, we can put that in the comments, but that radio button selection was changed to be where we could say 1, 2, 3. It gives us better information on where to lean towards rather than, because I think we're probably gonna get folks across the board. If we can give people second preference, that might give us a better indication as to which one to go to.
Okay, I can do that. I was thinking about that, but I was, again, trying to simplify it.
I thought about that concept also.
Hold on, Mr.
I'm
Toomer.
sorry.
Ms. Balil or Ms. Stout, did y'all have one of y'all have a question? No. Okay, Mr. Toomer, go ahead.
I thought you were pointing to me, I'm sorry. I thought about that, but then I said, that, well, if you really don't have a second preference, would that be indicated by you not selecting a second or third? And would that be explained that way? Because I don't like weekdays, weeknights at all.
I think I can add that as an option then. How about that?
The stack is on there though.
I'm sorry?
Yes.
It has, the link has already been forwarded, but I will resend it to do ranking, so that you all can rank your choices. Okay. All right, that is all I have out of the governance committee, policy committee, Mr. Hunter.
Vote
12:26. Is there, I'm asking for a motion to extend the meeting.
Motion to extend 15 minutes.
Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Lee. Are there any objections? All right, approve with unanimous consent. Mr. Hunter?
Good afternoon, I will be brief. So this, what we have today is just for implementation purposes only. There's no formal recommendation at this time coming from the policy committee. The only assigned thing that we had since our last meeting was to look at the budget, which the city budget has already been adopted. This is the largest budget in the history of the city of Atlanta, $854 million in the general fund. 258 million of that went to police, 118 to fire, transportation 52 million, city planning 27 million, parks and rec 52 million, corrections 20 million. We can send out the graphic if it has already been sent out in terms of that we borrowed from the Center for Civic Innovation that really broke it down. One thing that also has come up that I wanted to share is that the city had an unbudgeted surplus revenue for FY '24, and there were quite a few donations, $2 billion plus donations to nonprofit organizations that money was given out, to include $250K to the Atlanta Police Foundation, $50K to the Atlanta Preservation Center, $300K to the Atlanta Victims Assistance, $500,000 to the communities and schools of Atlanta, and various other things. We also will share that graphic with you all as well. And so what we're asking for those of you who want to comment, we did have quite a few members from the House who actually either attended or watched the budget hearings that happened over a series of a couple weeks for the various departments. We had not had the opportunity to convene before the budget was passed or another meeting before this meeting to get together to discuss any findings or things that are out there. But as you all know, it has already passed. So anything we talk about will have to be in retrospect. I did want to point out that in terms of the budget process, there does not seem to be enough intentionality with reaching out to the citizenry to understand how it works, what's going on. Like this cycle was a bit different. It was pushed up a couple weeks. If you pay attention to that kind of thing versus what has been in the past. So there are other nuances that I believe, right, that committee that we can ask to be done differently in terms of how we make sure that the people we represent, which is the citizenry, is engaged in the budget process if you choose to be, and that's not a lift. It should be easy. It should be something that you can understand, you can get your questions to, and in my opinion, it should be sought out, right? So more to come. If you have any questions, we'll share these graphics with you all. But right now, we just have information about the budget process. But in the future, we hope to be better engaged and also be able to be equipped to, if we need to, make comments about how our dollars are being spent for the city. And I'll entertain any questions there. Thank you.
Do you know when your next meeting will be, sir?
So we do have a meeting scheduled right now. It's tentatively, well, it's on the agenda for July 3rd, but I have been receiving some information that we need to push that up to the 1st and the 2nd. Although people may not travel on the 3rd, the Peachtree Road race is been for. And so people might be getting ready for that. So I'm going to quickly convene policy committee members. If you all can just see me right after the meeting and we can decide who we'll do it on the first or the second. And then, because we do have some things we want to discuss and to get some things prepared for the next meeting. And then also we have our working group, which we have a standing meeting depending on the issues as they arise. So we don't have to continue to find time to meet. So we decided as a group to set our working group meetings, set standard. Therefore, as the issues come in, like we have quite a few today, we already have a meeting where we can convene, talk, and get together.
What are those dates for the cadence?
So our next meeting right now is scheduled for July 3rd at 6 p.m. City Hall, but that may change. As soon as we get that information, we'll get it over to to TCP so they can communicate that to you all. For those who want to attend, and it's in person. That meeting will require notice, so that's an in-person meeting. And then our working group meeting will be July the 11th via Zoom. All is welcome to attend that as well.
Thank you so much. All right, quality of life, Mr. Hassan and Ms. Steins.
So we only have one item that we're currently, that we have referred to at the moment. It's technically a holdover from the former Land Use and Zoning Committee. And it's regarding the issues with
Tenantization.
Thank you, I can't remember the word. But essentially, concern was brought about the use of, guest houses in the zoning code and servants' quarters in the zoning code as terms, and how those terms can essentially be abused to create substandard living conditions, as noted, complaints specifically in Grove Park, where the concerns were raised and brought to APAB about a year ago. So that's something that Jim Martin was working on for a few months as a resolution. I believe what the draft language was attempting to do was to petition the city to simply remove all mention of servants' quarters and redefine the definition of family, since that definition allows you to have significantly more people on a lot without proper appliances. Like, you only allow like a hot plate or something like that. You don't need a refrigerator, you don't need a stove. Now, interestingly, I'm sure y'all saw the zoning 2.0 or final rounds meeting that started on, I think it was May 18th. And they actually gave us an update in the first module that they introduced. And they specifically spoke to guest houses, servants' quarters, that kind of language. Their goal currently is to remove it entirely from the zoning code, thus technically eliminating the current problem that stands. Of course, we should keep working on this resolution or problem statement, as we want to call it now. To get our voice heard, but I'm thinking the city's already heard this from a bunch of sources, not just us, so far, to the point that the consultants, and I think it's the TSW is the consulting group that's doing the current zoning rework draft. And yeah, they denoted that they received concerns about it. So they just said, let's just strike it. Because there's currently problems with defining ADUs or accessory dwelling units versus guest houses. Guest houses, literal, designed for temporary use only. You don't need appliances, you don't need a kitchen. Sometimes you don't even need a bathroom, most of the time you do. Whereas ADU, you have to have at least some appliances for residents. But it looks like they're getting ready to just get rid of those definitions entirely, so that's very helpful. But we're still going to work on sprucing up the language, and we had some good ideas for it at our last working group meeting. And our next working group meeting, because we're to policy, we're going to just focus on doing working groups right now to allow us to do Zoom. And that's scheduled for July 1st, thank you, at 7 p.m. on Zoom. Of course, I'll update all the committee members on the list with that link. But yeah, so we'll continue working on that, but that's the only thing we have referred to us at the moment. So I would also ask you to refer things to us. So we got more new stuff to work on, but it looks like the city is already listening on that issue regarding business orders and overcrowding and lack of appliances, all that kind of thing, just by getting rid of that piece in the zoning code, which, again, this is draft. It's not going to be adopted until next year. So this could change, but go on the right track. So
So I wonder if it's necessary for you all to keep working on it, if it's going to be stricken, or are you saying that you want to keep working on it in the case that it is not completely removed?
I think we're thinking, let's just hash out and get it done through next month's cycle, because again, this is not final. That could be removed from the draft theoretically, but, you know, they made a big point about it. It's very unlikely. I mean, most of the zoning drafts so far, it's not going to be changed. It's this far along. They want to adopt it next year. They're not going to rework half of it in the next few months, you know, because they're trying to do as much community engagement as possible within the next 6-7 months. So, I mean, we want to make sure the statement is still made to make sure it stays in the draft. So I'm not guaranteeing that it will stay in the draft, but it is extremely likely it will. So I think that we should still bring that up.
Mr. Hunter?
I think that the previous commission has shared, I will say I have not attended, I think I attended one meeting where service work was discussed last year. It was not at that meeting, it was pushed so far down the agenda. But there's a reason why it's called service quarters versus a guest house or an accessory dwelling unit. You can have service quarters. I have a single family house with no guest house and no accessory dwelling unit, and I can have a service quarters in my home. I think that the point is being that this is not a zoning issue. This is a code that says that we are allowed.
So Mr. Hunter, point of order, committee business. They have a meeting coming up and we're on a time, so we have 9 minutes. Five. It's 12:36.
It's not halfway off place. And
I would just recommend that any feedback that you have, send it to, Mr. Hassan and Ms. Steins and the quality of life committee.
We could see the look at before voting on it. See, once they draft their final, rather than getting the meeting ready. The final draft for the service meeting already.
It's not their draft, it's two different issues. So anything else, Mr. Hassan?
I had one quick question. Were ADUs to be removed from that language also?
Sorry, say it again.
Was the term ADU to be removed from that draft also?
No, they're keeping ADUs, they're expanding on ADUs, but it's just the guest house and service quarter issue, they're just trying to get rid of that.
Moving on to items for consideration. As many of you probably know, I think many of you have probably heard about the letter that the mayor of Atlanta sent to MARTA to stop the 5 Points transformation project. And there has also been concern and feedback and pushback from different agencies and organizations about accessibility during the construction project. While MARTA itself is not in our purview, the civic engagement process and planning and development is. So my question to this board is, do we want to make a statement about engagement around their accessibility plan or around the transformation plan? And if so, then we can refer that to the quality of life committee.
You know, the issues are first, I understood 5 Points just being shut down for a period of renovations.
Yes, so I'm sorry, I said I assume everybody knows what the issue is. Does everybody know?
So before we get into that, can you just disclose your connection to this issue since there are?
Yes. So many connections. So I am on the MARTA Board of Directors. And I am an employee of Propel ATL, who is one of the groups that has provided feedback against the accessibility plan for pedestrians and ADA users. And am I missing anything? No? Okay. Sometimes I forget.
So the mayor's opposition.
So
Yeah, yeah.
I don't want to say point, but
Yes.
can we just, those who know, can we just see if we want a referral or not? And then we can, it's a referral, it's going to the committee, they can decide something we need to speak to or not, and they can report out their findings and give a brief overview, kind of the position paper. The issue is present, we're all not gonna be on top of every issue, we care about things that are closest to us or that come to us. So I think to explain every issue that we might have, there's an issue with 5 Point Station water. Do we want to refer that to committee for further investigation and possible action? That is a motion on the floor, please.
No.
Is there a second? Then like that.
So-
Like, if we go through each issue, we're gonna be here another hour.
Yeah, so, was that an actual motion?
I mean, I can.
I mean, I'm just asking, because she just said no, and that's not how it works.
Dictator.
I'm just suggesting,
She's just
Yeah.
moving.
we can't tackle every issue either.
Right.
And this one is like two big dogs peeing on each other, what are we gonna do?
Right, so,
Let the record reflect.
I mean, snarling at each other.
so what I'm actually gonna do at this point, and I should have done earlier, I'm sorry, thank you for that, Kyle, for raising that, is I'm gonna turn this over to Debbie so that you all can report.
Okay, so,
So, Madam President, vacating the chair? Okay.
and Mr. Hunter, you had, that was a motion?
I'll make one so we can move on. I make a motion to refer the Marta 5 Point situation to the Quality of Life Committee for further investigation and possible action.
Second.
No.
There's a motion, the motion's been made and properly seconded to refer the MARTA situation to the Quality of Life Committee. Is there any discussion on the motion?
This meant the situation component, everybody asking for a full briefing on it, I just understood that 5 Points was gonna be shut down, then I heard that. No, I'm not, just saying that I think you can't move forward on a vote with such.
Yes, you can.
Yes, you can.
You can read it.
Yes, you can.
Yes, you can. And
Yes, you can.
you can just abstain and vote.
Yeah.
No, so the vote is to move it to a committee, is that correct?
Or not, or not.
Okay, I'm with that.
You can vote it every time.
I'm with referring it and then coming back with further.
Any other discussion on the motion? Do we need to do a roll call?
If there are no objections, you can pass it
I
object.
Okay, so we need a roll call vote.
Thank you, Amy, for clarifying. Okay, are you ready to?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, Ms. Glover,
Yes.
Mr. Schultz,
No.
Mr. Thurman,
Yes.
Mr. Barnett,
No.
Mr. Tiller.
It's gonna be a
Yes.
little slower than that, I'm
Okay,
sorry.
sorry.
Oh.
It's not easier when I just roll call the letters.
Sears. No.
Sears is no, I'm sorry, I missed, Toomer.
Yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Sears,
No.
No.
Mr. Taylor,
Yes.
Ms. Beloit,
No.
Ms. Stout,
No.
Mr. Kessler,
Yes.
Mr. Hunter,
In favor.
Ms. King,
Yes.
Mr. Hassan,
Same.
Ms. Stiles,
Abstain.
Dodd,
Abstain.
Ms. Lee,
Yes.
and Ms. Hawkins Wynn,
Yes.
and I vote yes.
Ms. Flowers
What
just
about Ms.
came.
Flower?
Oh, she wasn't there. She's right there. Ms. Flowers.
I'm abstaining.
Abstaining, thank you. And Ms. Jones.
Yes, I do. Okay, Tina Gower, 10 in favor, 4 opposed, and 5 opposed and 5 abstaining. 10 in favor, 5 opposed, and 5 abstaining.
So the motion carries.
The motion carries.
Motion carries. Wow. So, Mr. Hassan, please add this to your agenda. for your next
Other
call.
than July 1st.
Thank you.
Thank you. We don't have any quarterly board appointee reports.
Madam President, sorry, zoning 2.0. This is where we bring up other issues that we need to refer, right?
Yes, sir, I'm sorry.
That has not been referred. Do we want to do that or not? It is, I mean, it's going on.
I'd like to make a motion to refer zoning 2.0 to the Quality of Life Committee for consideration and discussion.
Second. I'm sorry, what was your motion?
I'd like to refer zoning 2.0 to
Gotcha.
Quality of Life Committee for review and comment.
So we don't actually have to do that. It's referred to committee. Zoning 2.0. Any other items for consideration?
CDD.
Yep. All right, that's referred to Quality of Life Committee.
You asked for a Scott.
I'll
say no one.
Also,
Right.
Also, we also have the Office of the Inspector General. We talked about that earlier. That's pending referral to a committee. It was referred by motion, right?
We did that earlier.
Okay, I'm sorry. And then there was one more, what was it?
What do you think of it? The room temperature.
Thank you. And I'm sorry, you all, I actually, as part of quality of life, it's like part of your definition, so I did not think to actually refer that to you, so my apologies for that, because that is just part of your purview, and that is our mission, so I didn't think that that needed an actual extra referral, so my apologies for that. Updates from the Department of City Planning.
And there are updates.
Always.
I will do my best to keep it very short. Quickly, I will introduce to those that have not met Lance Templeton, who is our newest employee, newest member of our team. He's the manager of the NPU Resources and Support Team, so he's working with Kip and Daniel. He did, one of his first APAB assignments was to order the Urban Alchemy books for the board, and he is the victim of our procurement process and was not able to have them in today, but he will have them on Monday, which is just a day late and $1 short. But we'll get them to y'all at some point.
We'll receive.
Yes, we will get them soon. NPU 50 news. We have the programs team, I believe, is working on a magnet mailer that will be sent out via USPS mail to some of our vulnerable, underserved, and under-resourced and less engaged neighborhoods. For the most part, just for information purposes, it's pretty much covering almost the entire south of I-20 area with a few other neighborhoods sprinkled in as well. Lots and lots of zip codes included there, and we do hope to be able to cover the rest of the city out of our FY25 budget. But for FY24, we're very pleased to be able to cover a much larger area than we thought we would be able to. We're also launching our block party series this week. A week from today, our first block party will be held in Sylvan Hills neighborhood, at which we will unveil our long-awaited block party trailer, and our block party program will be launched next spring, I believe, in which neighborhoods will be able to borrow the block party trailer for block parties in your neighborhood. We're very excited about that, as well as the neighborhood toolkit that we have some interns working on. We're just really building out resources for neighborhoods and NPUs. And I think you'll be interested in our phase 3 work, in which we'll be working to reimagine the NPU system and strengthening the system by taking some of the recommendations that we've received and new recommendations that are coming from you. I know Kyle probably gets it a lot. I certainly get tons of questions asking, when are we going to implement the CCI recommendations? Why have we not implemented the CCI recommendations? What is happening with that? Is the mayor supported, et cetera? That work will begin in phase 3. And I will be requesting time on your July agenda to present our draft project plan and our engagement plan in July so that you all can take a month to give us feedback. We'll come back in August and finalize that engagement plan and begin the work in September. We just completed our civic responsibility for young leaders class. I was very happy to have greater participation from APS high schools. We had representation from every APS high school except, sadly, Douglas High School, which happens to be the area in which I live. Very sad to not have any students from Douglas, but we did have students from every other high school in APS. We had 30 students that participated. They spent the week with us here at City Hall, an entire week here at City Hall. They also received 30 community service hours towards their degrees, which is a requirement of APS. And they received for the first time a stipend of $450 for participating in the program.
Speaking of stipends.
About that.
Is that new business?
Last but not least, very happy to, and shout out to Kip who carried the work on this, and shout out to our technology advisory group, a couple of which are in the room. But the technology advisory group makes recommendations on how we can use technology to improve our support to MPUs. That's the short version. One of their recommendations was for better support around record keeping, around websites and the like. So through the very hard work of the Technology Advisory Group, or TAG, and Kip Dunlap here, which is our MPU Resources and Support Coordinator, we were able to procure Google Workspaces for everybody. All 25 MPUs will, it's obviously not required, it won't be forced on any MPU that doesn't want to have the Google Workspace through the city. But if an MPU does want a Google Workspace through the city, we will be launching that, starting with a pilot program, which is launching now, of 6 MPUs. We invited 6 MPUs to participate in the pilot. We will get them already set up, and those that are already using Google Workspace will be migrating their data and doing all of the work to fix problems, work out kinks before we roll it out citywide, hopefully in the spring of 2025. So I'm very, very excited to share that. Many, many thanks to Kip and to the TAG for really getting this to the finish line. It is not the first win for the TAG, but it's the biggest one. So I thought it was worth sharing. Thank you for the time.
Thank you.
Who are the 6 MPUs?
The 6 MPUs are FOXJHS, correct? FOXJHS.
Yeah, I want to make the idea you talked about sending out communication to people that are not civically engaged inside of the city.
Yes.
I would like to say that maybe thinking about another way, because the mail is really an issue at this point, USPS mail.
Yes.
And our mails that's south of 20 are coming from this, coming from the Palmetto work, the hub, where all the issues is at. So if we could be cautious of that, and I don't know when that's going to get resolved. I'm actually going to send a request to our to Nikema Williams office to investigate, because it is an issue for us in my neighborhood, in my side of town.
So,
That's great.
He had his hand up. Okay. I wanted to just check back in, since you were speaking about technology and docu-signing and stuff, just a little nudge on that for those permits and everything.
We're working on that. It requires us to sort of adjust our process on the front end, so it's gonna be a big shift turn, but it's coming.
Yeah, that's estimated timeline. How long is that gonna take approximately?
Within this month, we can get it.
So I'm gonna, within this month, they never factor in procurement approvals and all that stuff, so I'll ask to give me 2 months to get that done.
And now I don't know about other MPUs, but it's not the beginning of the year, so we don't have as many permits right away, so it might be a good time to beta it or whatever.
Yes, agreed.
Remember special events and stuff.
Mr. Hunter?
I remember the other issue. It's important, yeah, so solid waste. There is an increase, potentially for solid waste that is being discussed. And I think that we should do a referral for that.
Solid waste, that's quality of life, but are you looking at it from the policy side or just?
It's gonna be a new legislation, so, there's already been proposed legislation out there, it's currently on hold.
I thought we'll refer that to policy.
They're hearing before next
There's a
week.
public hearing on July 9th during the day. Like literally during the day, during the Utilities Committee, which I believe meets at, is it 11 a.m.?
10.
10, I believe, 10 o'clock on July 9th.
July 9th.
So this is separate from APAB. No, that's,
Mr. Burnett?
Yeah, 10 o'clock on July 9th.
The cost of the Google Workspaces is being borne by the city.
Pardon me, I'm sorry.
The cost of those Google Workspaces is borne by the city, or make it available for the use to purchase the Google Workspace.
No. Yeah, no. The city is paying for the Google Workspace. The only caveat I will point out is that for those MPUs, and Kip, please correct me where I'm wrong. For those MPUs that do not have a website, they will have to purchase the domain only, but the rest is on the city. Correct? Correct.
I think, thank you for the meetings. I was wondering if there's any way, I know this may be off point, but it's Department of Planning, that you can provide us some water or some snacks for us when we meet here. Or at least water.
No water in Atlanta.
Coffee.
No water in Atlanta, sorry.
If you want to maintain quality of life, we need some water.
No water in
We'll
Atlanta.
revisit that. I will tell you, it's not a budget issue at this point.
I mean, I'll be happy to bring it, just if somebody brings it.
In the beginning, it was a budget issue. It's not a budget issue. We did serve breakfast for some time. Y'all may remember that.
Yes.
And there were lots of problems associated with that. And so it's not that we're opposed to it. It really is, it's not that we're opposed to it.
I mean, like some water.
It's the logistics.
And APAB.
It's just like water, granola bars, and like that's it. Like
Yeah,
nothing
I agree.
fancy, unless somebody wants something fancy.
No.
I would like a quiche.
I hear you.
You'd like a quiche.
Me too.
I hear the director of EPU really likes Panera. Really likes Panera. I heard you really likes Panera.
We are.
Amy.
I just want to say one thing under announcements is, thank you to all the MPUs and neighborhoods that stepped up during the water main break to help their neighbors, during that time. I've heard several, accounts of MPUs going out, buying water, distributing it to residents, right alongside the Atlanta Fire Department. So big kudos to you all, because that is really a great place where you do great work. And we should absolutely recognize that. With that said, with the water main break issue, there is a meeting on July 9th. There's supposed to be a working session. I will find out more details, because there was kind of a question mark about that with the Utilities Committee with the United States Army Corps of Engineers about the water main break and the study that they're supposed to conduct on how to improve the system. So I highly recommend, even if you can't attend in person, that you watch that online. You can actually, I guess that should be referred to quality of life, where you all sit.
We definitely need food, Eric. I think we need quiches. I agree with you.
And then our next APAB meeting is on Saturday, July 20th at 10 a.m. I will actually be traveling, so.
Thanks.
I forgot myself. Yes, ma'am.
I just want to say quickly, Invest Atlanta will have an ordinance go to the city council, and it has to do with business recovery from the water main break. Those businesses that had to turn down and lose their business, there are funds that they want to help to recover. And that will be voted on Monday.
Are they gonna vote on the arena because they had to cancel concerts? Are they looking for reimbursement as well?
They'll just have-
Okay. What'd you say?
Return to quality of life.
Thanks, Michael. I make the motion to adjourn.
Second.
I'm sorry.
I think I'm giving it.
I'll be gone.